Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mrs. Petrielli, roll call, please.
Krinsky.
Present.
Karlovic.
Present.
Thank you.
Blank.
Present.
Mencia.
Present.
Petrielli present. Reed.
Oh, present.
And Schumacher.
Present.
All here.
Okay, thank you. Now let's please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Now it's time for comments and suggestions from the public. I have a comment that we received today that I will read. It is from Mrs. Judy Cox. One of the key indicators of student success in school on standardized tests and indeed in life is their vocabulary. The reasoning behind this is simple. The knowledge that anyone has on a topic is based on the vocabulary of that information. Added to this is that students come to school with what is called prior knowledge or background knowledge about subject matter and how vocabulary supports this knowledge. This instructional language differs from social language that children acquire just from conversing in a language. Therefore, it came as a surprise that when looking to adopt a new core mathematics program, the district is hoping the board will, tonight, adopt illustrative math as their core math program for next year. After 2 years of piloting in Ready Math and Bridges, the district decided that further study was needed. During the COVID-19 lockdown, a supposed new resource became available called Illustrative Math. This core program has neither been evaluated or used by our teachers. In fact, the program for K through 5 is still in the process of being developed and will not be ready until the fall of 2021. Again, this is a case where the district jumps in with the latest and unproven program. This yearly cost is $173,073. The cost does not include manipulatives. In addition, illustrative math is heavily language dependent, a problem for our ESL and bilingual students who are still establishing a base of academic language. IM requires that students talk and write about math when approaching a mathematical situation. Lessons are centered around small group activities, again, an added problem when social distancing is still being practiced. I have looked at the illustrative math program and viewed its components. I have also compared our math program to the math programs in other districts. District 59 lacks resources, evidence-based studies, and information for parents to become partners in their children's education. It is time to listen to our teachers who need to have an active role in choosing and analyzing a program's effectiveness. The piloting that did take place sometimes included only one teacher in a school piloting a program. Is that a valid evaluation? Our teachers have degrees in teaching. They also continue to upgrade their teaching credentials and information base to learn of new methods of teaching and of evidence-based strategies as they become available. Let's return our district's focus to the teachers and the students. What do they need to be successful in life? Okay, that is the only email I received. Has anybody?
Did you send that out to the board?
Yes, I did.
I didn't get it. Would you mind sending it back? Send it to me again?
Sure. Has anybody else come to speak before the board? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. I'm just going to send this to Mardell.
All right, thank you. Perfect timing based on the public comment. I think there was some information out there that wasn't completely accurate, and I think we'll be able to address some of those comments through the updated math presentation today. So Maureen will introduce her team, and she'll provide some great information this evening. Maureen?
All right, thank you. Is the mic working?
I don't think we can.
Now it's working. Okay. Thank you for having us. Michelle Benages and Nicole Robinson are back with me. And tonight, really, we want to just do some follow-up pieces. So I will be the primary presenter, and then Nicole and Michelle will jump in and help with any questions. So first of all, I want to just make sure that the board has had a chance to see the frequently asked questions document, and it is on our website as well, where we've tried to address some of these questions that have come up, as well as you came in, you could see the demonstration table, so that anybody who would like to look through the materials or even the online materials can do so there. We've also been doing some follow-up work with staff. So last Monday, as part of the remote learning planning day, we had a chance to have all the elementary staff together for almost 2 hours. So that was wonderful. We were able to give them a kind of a preview on, or let them know kind of what our process was, talk about what the highlights of illustrative math, and really how illustrative math will fit into our overall math curriculum. And so I want to share a little bit about those follow-up pieces with you tonight. So you can go ahead, Dr. Fessler. So this, I'm not going to go through all these pieces. This is kind of a visual, a concept for you to look at. This is what we see the work of our implementation team to be. You can see one of these components is illustrative math, but it's one piece of a larger curriculum framework. And when I saw a lot of the frequently asked questions that were coming in, I felt like I wanted to show this to the board. This is draft, this is concept. The work will be of the implementation team to put the detail on these pieces. So when we talk about the math curriculum in District 59, we're talking broader than just one resource, because we know we have several resources. So we shared this with the teachers as well, so they could see things like learning targets are not going away. We're keeping our learning targets. They could see what again, this is just a concept, but we heard that there were a lot of questions about fluency and how we're assessing. So you can see we have a placeholder there. Our intention would be, let's have interim assessments throughout the year in those fluency standards. That seems to be something that people are asking more about. So things like that, how we assess, how we're providing professional development, how it aligns with MTSS, this will all kind of be built out further. But I wanted you just to see this as a visual. That's our curriculum framework.
I have a quick question. Have you been able to get the feedback from teachers as well? Because isn't this mostly community and parents at
It
this
is,
point?
and actually that's perfect timing, thank you, to
Okay.
get started on our staff feedback.
Okay.
So the next slide.
Questions about
oh.
information on the slide?
Well, I like it a lot, but the essential learning targets are coming from the state standards, correct? And then those are the most critical ones that you feel that all children need, especially as they move through the grades, because that material is needed to build upon.
Correct,
Okay.
yep. So we asked the staff after the session to tell us how they feel about the overall, the math curriculum framework. And how confident are they that that will strengthen our overall math program? So first we asked about the framework. And you can see that we had very high, like the 4s and 5s were agree and strongly agree. So that you can see this is what they said about that overall framework. I think this one was 91% of the staff either agreeing or strongly agreeing, and a few 3s and 2 and a 1s. Mm-hmm.
How much does this represent of the total staff, though? Because this adds up to 100% here, but that doesn't include all the teachers that maybe didn't.
Yeah, there were almost
respond.
200 that replied. I'd have to quick do the math on it. Okay.
Well, how many teachers does that represent?
Oh, I'm sure that is, because when we think about all elementary staff, when we're planning
Right.
for PD, that's coaches, administrators, it's 250.
Okay.
So this would be a very high percentage. I will say there were about almost like 285 people in the Zoom session.
Okay.
Many of those were ESPs, people in other roles.
Okay.
So to have 200 respond out of 283 that were there, we were very happy with that. We really built in the time and asked staff right at that moment, please complete the exit slip.
I guess the only thing I found confusing is that with the way that this is laid out, it doesn't, when you say 55.4%, it makes it sound like all staff, because you don't know what the total is. I don't know
Okay.
how many. So it's just, informational that would be,
Yep.
helpful.
Okay, yes, so we had 204 that completed that. So we were, and I can't even, again, this is a quantitative piece. We'll get to the qualitative in a moment, but I think you can see the staff wholeheartedly supported the curriculum framework. The next slide was, sure.
Maureen, before you jump in, were we able to track how many staff members actually signed up to view the materials outside the hall?
Staff members, we had 2 sign up. We don't believe they came on the day that they had signed up for, and I think we had 2. This is today the 3rd set of community members who've come to see it. So 4 people scheduled times to come look at it. Of those 4, 3 came to look at it.
I did come and look at this beforehand. So
Okay.
I have some idea, not complete, but some idea. How much in the way of basics are covered in this new illustrative math? Anything in the way of basics or not?
Everything in the way of basics, like the fluency standards for each grade level which are kind of those basics, are embedded in each and every unit. And as you could see on that framework, something that we intend to regularly assess students so that we can monitor their progress.
And it looks like there's a book for every grade. And is this actually something we're going to use at both in class?
Our teachers were very excited about the digital and print resources. They were very pleased that it had both and that our recommendation was to get both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was thrilled to see the book.
Yeah, and the books are by unit, so for the most part, so that students, when they finish the unit, they finish that book and then they get the next book.
I guess one question about the fundamentals, what you're calling fluency is, I think the reason why you went to a framework, correct, in that the way in which, it seemed to me when I looked at the materials, that they were practicing those foundational skills were embedded in problems, so it wasn't necessarily the kind of more targeted instruction that you would need for them to actually really learn certain skills, because they're sort of having to abstract them through those materials. So isn't that why we're adding some additional supports and why you went to a framework to start with, so that you could?
Not exactly. I think there are both. I mean,
Okay.
there are opportunities where they're just demonstrating fluency, in it not contextualized in a problem.
Okay,
So that one of the things that the team really liked is that it does have that balance of both.
okay, so it really is there.
Yeah, recognizing that kids do need to, without a problem, or be able to fluently meet those fluency standards.
Right, add 2 digits, add whatever, the different kinds of skills, good.
It is often contextualized, but
Yeah.
not always.
Okay.
And lots of visual supports throughout the grades. But also, when we want to see what is their fluency, they also have opportunities where those visual supports are not there.
So could you respond to the public comment question about it being so heavily language-based? I know that one of the attractions to the resource was that it was available in English and Spanish, but I'm wondering, like, for children who might have Polish as a first language or different other first languages, how do you think they will approach the materials in the younger years, given sort of the contextualized language?
And it is contextualized and heavily visual. I'm not quite sure. I mean, actually, it embeds a lot of language and a language opportunities. So I disagree with the comment and the assessment of that. Students are going to be having conversations and discourse in the classroom all the time, with prompts and tools to make it comprehensible. But
And I would just add that there would be no math curriculum that was aligned with the Common Core. Thank you very much. That's aligned with the Common Core that does not include language routines.
Right,
I mean,
it has
those are
to.
part of the standards.
Right.
And so it wouldn't be aligned if it did not have the language embedded.
Maureen, when we talked about a month ago, there was a delay in the Spanish materials. Has there been any update in that?
I do have an update on that. So what we are told is that the program, the platform will be ready with the new materials by the staff training this summer. So they will be on the new platform before the start of the school year. The translations of all the student-facing materials are being done. So they assure us that the Spanish-facing materials will be on the platform by the start of school for the first 2 units. But what we will have a delay in is ordering those books. So probably right now for the book, they're producing the books that will be delivered to schools in the fall. So there will be a delay in the receipt of the Spanish books, but the resources will be online. So as a district, we can decide, do we want to go ahead and print those out to make booklets for students for those first 2 units? Those are some of the things we've talked about. But it is a brand new, I should say, the other thing I want to mention is it is new to K-5 on the market. It's been in pilot version for several years. And there's also a 6, 8, and I believe high school even 2 version. So this is not the first math curriculum that has been produced by Illustrative Math. They've just now dipped down into the K-5 level.
Thanks. Just to follow up on that piece, because I know what I've heard from teachers, some of the frustrations with, in the past, like learning experiences not being complete or fully available at the time they had to start to teach them. But it sounds like even on the Spanish side, they will have all of the units available at the time that they begin teaching, at least online. And then will the teacher's edition of the book definitely be available in Spanish, or is it, I guess I'm just trying to understand, is it only the student piece?
It's the student-facing
Okay.
materials. Now, I will say one of the things the teachers loved was that they have slideshows for every lesson. And not even just for remote learning. It helps teachers stay organized when they're presenting the lesson. They do not have the slideshows translated, but we are going to be translating the slideshows. We want the experience, the visual experience in any classroom to look similar. And so that is a piece that we have committed to doing as well. So that if you're in a classroom where they're accessing the curriculum in Spanish, your slideshow will look the same as classrooms where they're and the teachers don't have to use the slideshows. It's just one of the tools, and the teachers were thrilled about that part.
Maureen, in addition to the slideshows, who's doing the translations for the first 2 units? Are we doing that?
No,
internally?
Illustrative, Learn Zillion actually is doing that. The other thing I was trying to really say, well, how do we know? You're telling me this, but can we get some assurances? The other thing, and again, they've given us their assurances, but also one of their customers is, I think, Los Angeles Unified School District, and that is one of the caveats of their contract with Illustrative Math. So that's quite a larger district than District 59. So if they've promised that to Los Angeles Unified School District, we felt pretty comfortable.
Let's get those promises in writing.
Yeah, I was just going to add, the 2 lawyers have a quick comment on that.
Says the lawyers.
I would just make sure that we're not committed to the license fees on those components unless they produce in a timely manner. And I'm optimistic as a grad of LAUSD myself that hopefully that'll help.
Yeah.
I have one more question about how, if you could walk me through how the assessments are tied with the foundational skills. So say they're doing some resources, and you say 3 times a year. Is there some map that the teachers have to know that at this point, the kids have to be ready, they have to know these certain skills?
There are the progressions to that, and that is, we don't have that yet. That's going to be part of our framework.
Right, of
And that is,
course.
so right now it's a concept. Our initial thinking as a team was, if we monitored that 3 times a year in the elementary, once each trimester, then we would be able to see how students are progressing toward that end of year. Because the fluency standards are end of year standards. So when a student comes in the first trimester and they haven't mastered it, they're not expected to master it. There are intervals to get there.
Right, so as long as that's clear to teachers, because I think some of that information, the more explicit it is, the better, so teachers can understand that map. And I know you're not done. I think this is wonderful, and you've got a lot of the components in place. And then that integration, I know that's what you're going to be working on.
Right.
But as long as that, there's sort of a map for teachers so that they can understand how they're going to get there. Because if you go to the end of the year and they were supposed to have learned a very important skill for the next year and they haven't, and you test them too late in the year, and then you don't have time to address it, to make sure, to go back and reteach for them.
Right, exactly why we want to do it throughout.
Yeah.
Michelle or
Yeah.
Nicole, anything else you want to add to that, or?
Well, I would just like to say that along that lines of the progression of the fluency standards at each grade level, this year, part of that work that we had put in place for teachers is to really help identify what that progression looks like
Okay.
and each stage.
Okay.
Like everything, there's a lot of information out there, so we tried our best in working with coaches and getting that message out and sharing those documents. They are live and accessible along
Good.
each grade level scope and sequence document. But that progression really does map out for teachers what it looks like in the beginning of the year versus the middle versus end of the year fluency,
Right.
along with identifying some great assessments to help really understand students' understanding of fluency.
Yes,
It's not
good.
just, being accurate and being fast. It's really having those flexible strategies. So a lot of the assessments are built around having opportunities to observe students and listen to students' reasoning and thinking
Well,
to
that's
really
great.
understand that flexible
That's
thinking.
great, because that's certainly an important component. If you're just teaching a bunch of procedures and they don't know how to deal with them flexibly, they're not gonna be able to solve problems that become, more complex.
A lot of
So-
paper pencil assessments are very hard to see that flexible thinking, so
Yeah.
that's why we really tried to build those out
Yeah.
through some of our other assessment pieces.
So, because I don't see progression on here, so you're saying partly it's under scope and sequence.
Correct.
That'll be our
Um,
next edit.
Just
No, it makes
looking
sense.
at the picture,
Sure.
and I love it. I think it's very comprehensive, and I know you've got a lot of work to do.
No, that's a
And you'll get
great
it done.
thing to include.
Justin is saying that we need to talk a little closer to microphones. People at home can't hear us as well.
Okay, sorry about
Thank you.
that. They
My
probably
question
hear
is,
me.
assuming that we are happy with the illustrative math and we choose this and spend the money and so forth, are we doing anything with the iReady, or is this, we're going to
No,
keep
I already
using?
will, if you go back to that framework page, you can see that under instructional resources, we will continue to use iReady and Number Corner.
So how do you think that the iReady and the number, whatever it is, and the illustrative math are going to meld?
Well, and the iReady, remember, is the purpose of iReady is really that diagnostic assessment 3 times per year and the digital pathway. So when teachers want students to be practicing, they can be practicing it's at their level with exactly what they need. So that's kind of, maybe students would be doing that while the teacher was working with a small group. So they can occur at the same time. Or maybe the students are assigned to do some work on iReady in the evening.
So they will work together.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes, for sure. And the teachers were excited about that too. There were a lot of comments, especially in the chat, about Number Corner, like, oh, I'm so glad we get to keep Number Corner. So a lot of excitement about that.
And part of the work that we're doing with the implementation plan is helping teachers visualize how those work together, understanding the purposes of each of the different resources and how to integrate those. So that will be ongoing
Excellent.
learning for our staff as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. So my question, I guess more broadly, is how do we feel this particular resource is poised to help us in this pandemic year where a lot of students may be off grade level?
And that was, I think if you go to there we go. That was one of the things that teachers liked as well. I think it's in here somewhere. The adaptation packs is it for every unit, Michelle?
Every unit, yeah.
So every unit has an adaptation pack, so that really is something that teachers can go to that would help them address unfinished learning in a particular area. So it gives them those tools before they start the unit, but without taking away access to the grade level content.
Right. I think another part of our professional learning is to make sure that our staff understand that best practice is giving students access to grade level curriculum because they need to be at grade level, right? So the only way to do that is to expose and then to shore up the unfinished learning as part of that. So that's embedded within the resource, and it's something we'll make sure to highlight in our professional learning.
I'm sorry, it's embedded in which resource?
Within the illustrative math resource.
Okay,
That adaptation pack is the unfinished learning. So if students missed this in the previous year, here's how to support that
while also ensuring they're receiving the grade level instruction
How
they
do,
deserve.
how do they diagnose it so they know what it is that they should be using?
So built in within the curriculum, they have identified even within the cool downs of every daily lesson, they have provided guidance for teachers. So if students respond in such a way, that would guide them to accessing maybe the previous grade level's
Okay.
lesson that really helps support those prerequisite skills for that grade level access.
Okay.
And that was one of, we had reached out to Kankakee School District 111, and that was one of their positive feedbacks this year, is that their adaptation packs were very beneficial for their teachers in accessing unfinished learning from this last year.
So that's one of the districts you actually talked to that have been using this? And they've,
And that's also where iReady comes in, too. That really helps us with that. That's where those two can work together hand in hand.
okay.
So
thank
this,
you.
I mean, just highlighted some of the overall kind of the comments of teachers, what they were excited about. When we took a pause in the session to add our reactions in the chat, we kind of summarized some of those, and they're basically it. They were very excited about the alignment with workshop, and that was something that was a little bit more challenging with Ready Math or Bridges. It was going to be a little bit more of a stretch to get to that workshop model. And really the biggest thing, I think the one that came up the most was having all the resources in one place.
Right.
Was very, very popular. Anything else that you guys can think of that was super popular, Nicole or Michelle?
Just having the print materials was big, print and digital, for that flexibility, and the slideshows that are ready. Our teachers are spending hours, planning their own slideshows based on, on the curriculum they need to present. So the fact that this is there for them and they can just make tweaks instead of creating it from scratch is huge.
And I'd like to also add that our teachers through last Monday's session have been given access to our demo account. Many teachers, coaches were reaching out, are you sure where they could use these lessons right now? And they have. So teachers have been able to easily pick up in connecting to our essential learning targets,
awesome.
lessons to implement right away,
great.
even within days of gaining access to that demo account.
Question, if this is implemented in the fall, how do we plan to gauge the success of the resource?
Yeah, I
Like,
think-
how do we assess if it's working, like the way we want it to work?
And I think that kind of goes back to that framework too, where we have outlined, I mean, not in terms of specific details, but a piece of that framework will be that reflection and revision process.
Right.
Some of that's going to be looking at how our students are performing on those various assessments, how they're growing. That's going to be staff feedback, parent feedback, student feedback. Our implementation team is working now on, how do we have a regular way, even if it's monthly, can we gather a rep from each school monthly and just kind of round table, how's it going, what's working well, what's not going as well, and just that we can really keep a pulse on even that teacher input on how things are going. Because that might be the program, it might be the implementation, it might help us know how we can support that better.
How are the parents going to be able to see these books? Will these books go home? They will go home.
Yes.
Because I think the parents want to see something.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about that too. There's nothing in here about homework, and we know that certain parents do want homework for their kids. So is there enough material, say, in the workbooks, or is it online, that parents can do with their children at home if they really feel strongly about it?
Yes, there's guidance for families. Each unit does provide a family letter that gives, with each unit, each section within the unit, just some activities and things to kind of foster that conversation at home as to what they're doing. They also provide teachers with assigning digitally and or through the workbook practice problems for them to kind of continue that learning at home. And then we also see iReady being another component of
That's what I
helping
was-
with that asynchronous work,
Yeah.
whether the teacher assigns a lesson through iReady or they continue to work on their pathway.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Patty.
If students are, say, 2 or 3 grade levels below, will they get a different workbook, or will they get their grade level workbook, and how will that, how will they be working with those kids that need to be brought up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, they would still have a grade level workbook, but the teacher might access those adaptation packs to go to, as a prior to starting the unit, to make sure they have that necessary background. That would also be coupled, though still, with our MTSS process, where the child might be receiving tier 2 interventions. And the learning, what's nice is the essential learning targets are the learning targets. So whether you're in intervention or in your classroom, where we have a common goal, which are those essential learning targets for each grade.
And that's also where iReady could supplement, where it has that digital learning path. So when they take a test on iReady, it gives them a score, and then kids can work based on that score to try to improve and get to grade level. So the combination of those things support each other.
I think it's good to have those multiple resources because children do learn differently, and so maybe one works better with a child than another. So you have multiple ways in which you can support kids and families.
So I was going to ask about the daily math block of being 90 minutes. What is our current daily block of math time?
Well, current meaning, typically, in a typical year, it has been 75 minutes.
Okay.
And really, you might remember that this year, we wanted to implement a WIN block. But with the pandemic, our typical vision of a WIN block was not possible, but we still hold that vision and feel like if we have 90 minutes, we have sufficient time for a whole group lesson. There are whole group lessons. I think that was something else in the public comment that I want to just clarify. There are whole group lessons. Every lesson has a structure that includes whole group, practice, small group, et cetera. So that would allow enough time for whole group, teacher to even work with a group or two to reinforce some skills, and potentially then have a half an hour time that could be what I need or win time, where within a school, kids might be regrouped, they might be getting more instruction that is more targeted to their needs. That's not intervention, that's just part of our tier 1.
And that's another focus on those fluency
Yeah,
standards, so we
yeah.
want to make sure we're keeping our eye on is during that win time.
And you were doing WIN time. It was being done differently at different schools, but Salt Creek was definitely doing it because I was one of the tutors on it, and it was actually targeted for all children just to make sure that they learn some, fundamentals so that they could add correctly and subtract correctly as we started moving forward. But the one thing that I never heard about was how effective it was. And do we have an assessment to make sure that we are tracking these things so we know that they're working or not? I mean, they should be, but where do we start and where do we end up?
Yeah, and that's definitely part of our framework and what we'll be developing is to make sure that we're keeping track of that.
Great. I know it's a lot of work, you guys. I don't envy all that work, but on the other hand, it's such important work.
Yes, it is.
And
it's,
even the 90
really
minutes
good.
also accommodates to, at the primary level, more that number corner.
Yeah.
That
Right.
is something it's a daily routine that's 15 to 20 minutes. But when something is new for teachers, it sometimes takes a little longer. So we wanted to make sure that there was ample time for math instruction. And that was another popular idea among the staff. They were pleased to see that.
One simple thing that I think we have to, it's so simple that we might forget about it. We now have a book for math. It can go home or will go home. It's got to be emphasized with the parents so that book comes back to school every day, because without the book.
Mardell, that's why I was also kind of glad that they sold, the book is by unit, so that if a book was missing, it wouldn't be the entire book. It's just the book for that unit. Is it all grades, Michelle? Okay.
Yep.
So that way, couldn't remember if it was primary too.
I
So
just
that
thought
way,
I'd mention it because it's something that must be
You're
done.
right.
Maureen, in my questions, I had a lot of questions about the process of selecting this, especially during, this year, but, what are your thoughts the consequences of not moving forward with the resource? How does that impact, the students?
Yeah, and we did talk about that too, with our team and even with the staff, that this is what we've been looking for. We've been working on this. It's been kind of a bumpy road and a little bit longer than we anticipated. I think we know that no product is perfect. And I know that, they mentioned Ready and Bridges. We have nothing against Ready and Bridges. We wouldn't have piloted them and invested that much time if they weren't quality. This product just had more of the pieces that were aligned to our drivers, but not every single piece. Every single product we looked at had, a lot of strong points, but nothing was perfect. So I think in terms of the process, I do think the pandemic changed our viewpoint a little bit, I have to be honest. Even about Ready and Bridges, and even the team members. The other thing, last week, the teachers got to hear from the team members. So the teachers that were on the team shared their reflections about the process and about how they viewed the product, so that we could really make sure teachers heard from teachers, classroom teachers on the team, to just make sure that they were confident with that. The process was not how we typically would. I'll be honest, there were pieces, though, I feel like worked out better than the original process, and pieces that were just more challenging given our environment this year. And we felt like we had to stick to that commitment to having a new core resource. In my opinion, I feel like we need to do that. To go another year would really be very, very challenging. I feel like, especially now more than ever, we need to make sure that we have a solid core resource.
Well, I think one of the reasons you said that it was, in some ways it was better in a conversation that we had, was because you could go much more in depth. So you could really sort of try it on at a deeper level. So I
And
think
you get
that
to
was
know
a
it and
plus.
really help
Yeah.
us stick to those drivers too, and
Yeah.
really understand it that way.
And one comment, I believe it's addressed in the FAQ, but for the parents that may be listening at home, this would be implemented in the fall, and this has been run by Dr. Bresnahan, our incoming superintendent, and she is supportive of.
Yeah, and even the curriculum framework document that you saw, she has looked at that. She's given us suggestions for that. Oh, you might want to include this as well. And so we had several meetings to make sure she understands the process, where we're at, why, and then the next steps. So she is aware, and I even updated her after the session last Monday.
Oh, good.
And then some next steps too, and I'm, of course, still open to questions. There were some questions in the exit slip, so we are preparing, after tonight, to answer those. For dual language especially, will we have this? Well, a lot of questions specific to dual language. So we're actually we'll have a communication that is just to dual language teachers with some of those follow-up items. That communication will take place. We'll be working on that math curriculum framework. We will be scheduling professional learning. We also asked the teachers last Monday, so which of these dates for the summer might work best for the professional learning? Obviously, if someone can't attend it in the summer, they will attend it, when the school year starts. But teachers are usually excited and eager. In fact, the number one choice from the exit slip, I think, was the week of June 7th. Yeah. So they are excited. And we are also hoping to have a first session from illustrative math on the 28th at the PLT. Depending, approval. We're going to connect with them tomorrow to let them know if we're going forward with that or not. And potentially even, and then in the summer, it's a 2-day training. And it is an ongoing process, I think up to 2 years of ongoing professional learning from illustrative math. And then talk to junior high math departments, as we said last time. The Open Up resource that our junior highs have is the free open version, initial version, connected with illustrative math. So they can access that currently through Open Up, but we want to share the illustrative math platform and see, so they can take a look to see, might it make sense to upgrade the junior highs to the illustrative math platform. It would be the same nuts and bolts, just more to it on the platform, a lot more bells and whistles than they currently have.
Have you had junior high input to make sure that everything's aligned with junior highs? I mean, I'm sure you're doing that anyway, but they may have some additional comments.
We did not have
feedback.
junior high people on our team, but I will say we looked at K-8 and also the standards are,
Okay.
we were looking for alignment with the standards.
Okay,
And if that alignment is there, then we will have that cohesive K-8.
sounds good.
But just even the reason we would open it up and take a look at junior high, so we might be back talking about junior high, is that the routines, the lesson structures, those with kids would get used to, and it might be kind of nice to have something K-8 where, the math routines, the language routines are common.
So when would you think about this, Kate, the junior high level? Would it be this fall or would it be the fall of 2022?
I think our initial step is to talk to those math departments. I think we have a meeting, we're setting up a meeting just to show and kind of see, this whole process, we've really, initially going back to the curriculum committee was driven by the teachers. So we want to make sure that, want to get their input first before determining a timeline. Anything else, Michelle or Nicole?
The only thing I can think of is in the past, I've said that our 3 junior highs are so entirely different in size and makeup and so forth. So I think when you get to that point, when you're working with the junior highs, you're going to have to pretty much work individually with the 3 of them because they may not be able to go down the same path exactly the same way.
We're trying to bring them closer in alignment, but, no 2 schools are ever going to be exactly the same.
There might be twitches that'll have to be made.
Right. Other questions or comments?
We have another slide.
Oh, I think that is, that was from last, the cost. So what we would be purchasing is the student licenses. That's an annual cost. The teacher's manuals are not an annual cost. Those would be a one-time purchase. And the print materials would be also an annual cost. So that you could be looking at the print materials and the licenses are annual. This is more typical nowadays. It used to be the price tag was huge, but it was like you bought everything now. Now it's really more that annual license. You saw that in STEM scopes. We see that in a lot. The good part of that is they're constantly updating and refining and adding. Not like in the old days where you just got this book and you better like it because you got it for 10 years. So now we do get improvement each year.
Question, and is the current plan, how many years are we looking at? 1 year, 3 years, 5?
Initially, some companies give pretty big discounts for multi-year contracts. Illustrative Math or Learn Zillion is not one. So this is like the first year cost. We weren't entertaining any multi-year just because there wasn't really a financial benefit at this time. But it's definitely not considered to be a one-year expense.
And we are not planning on, hopefully, hopefully this goes well. Everyone, the students' outcomes are great, and we don't have to consider making any changes in the near future. We hope this is a long-term solution.
Well, I'm sure you'll be constantly also improving things, but let's hope that it's definitely, lives up to its reputation. Now, replenishing the math manipulatives, I know we gave them away so that children could have them at home, but generally, that's not a complete refresh every year, correct? I mean, most of the stuff sticks around and you can reuse it.
Yeah, we shouldn't have, that would not be an annual cost. That would be, we want to just start from scratch because every classroom right now has different things. Let's just start over. Another very exciting thing for the teachers. And then after that, we would not be doing that every year.
Okay. I think it looks good. I thank you for all the hard work you've been putting in on this stuff. And we're being so responsive to the board and the community and the parents, and I know that there'll still be things that are going to need to be worked out. It is, and I like that they say it's a 2-year training process, because let's face it, to say that it's less than that is not really realistic, is it? I mean, this is a lot for teachers to pick up and learn, but the structure will help them, of course. But to take those 2 years to do it, I think is really important.
I just wanted to say thank you too for answering all of our out-of-meeting questions, as well as putting together, I think this is helpful to anyone who's listening, you have a very extensive FAQ that we've referenced tonight that you put together, and I think a lot of the key questions are addressed by that FAQ, so I appreciate the time preparing that too.
Yes,
Of course.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
And Maureen, those questions are linked on the instruction
They
link
are on the
or
website
on the
under,
front page?
I think, Justin Math. He sent me an email today.
I was able to find it by typing FAQ math.
Okay.
Right, so
FAQ Math in the search
Anyone
bar.
listening who wants to access those, you can find those on our website.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, now we're up
Thank
to
you, ladies.
6.0, which is discussion items. The first one is 6.01, return to in-person remote update.
Good evening. Thank you. We'd like to talk a little bit about the return to in-person instruction, how that's going. also comment briefly on the remote as well, and share some updated information. Some of this is redundant, so we'll move through it quickly. I do know there's some interest around elementary Wednesday, so we've prepared a couple of slides and some information for discussion with the board with that. So just quickly, April return update. We'll talk about hybrid enrollment metrics, some updates in those key areas, and then next step and overview. So Tom, would you begin with the hybrid enrollment update, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Fessler. So this is our enrollment as of Friday. We have seen, as I think everyone's aware, a steady increase in our in-person enrollment to the point now that far right column shows since March 15th, that was the date, the last deadline for parents to submit requests to make a change. We've had over 800 students return to in-person. So right now we're at 68.3% of our kids are in-person, 1937 are still participating via remote. So that number has changed, likely will continue. Principals have shared they continue to get a few phone calls from parents as we move through this process. And as you can see, the in-person percentage runs from a high at Claremont of 88.2% to a low at Holmes of 55.4%, with lots of variance in between. This slide shows analysis of the actual classroom sizes of 14 and up. This has changed pretty dramatically since our last time together, and really just shows by school, the number of classes. Again, that can change on a daily basis if one or two kids come back to school and in person. In March, when we last met, we had 42 total elementary classes that were 14 and over. Now we're at 85. In the junior high, we were at 179, and now we're at 449. So you can see how that plays out across schools. And we have started to see, and honestly, this is the first time I really looked closely at it, the number of classes that have all students present. From reviewing that, about, I think, 8 out of the 20 at the elementary are actually special ed classes, smaller classes for special ed program classes, and 12 of the 19 at the junior high. But the reality is we do have some standard classes where all kids are present. I have heard through the grapevine teachers love that when they can go back to normal standard kind of teaching and not be Zooming with the kids at home and in school, although our staff have done great in making that happen.
Thanks, Tom. And I will remind the board that, you know, at some point we committed to just making sure kids stayed with the same teachers the entire year. And that was the primary decision to going to the live stream for the remote. We recognized that was and is not easy for our teachers. And as Tom said, commend them for really stepping up to that challenge. Yeah. But really the primary rationale was to make sure that we maintain the same kids with the same teachers for the entire school year. Right. Katie will take us through the metrics tracking. Katie?
Last week, we had 4 positive COVID cases in the district, and we've actually had 4 positive cases the last 3 weeks in a row, so our numbers have been fairly consistent. We've seen less quarantines. However, with the return of many more students, which we're very excited about, we know that some of our classes are less than 6 feet. So I do anticipate that we'll see with close contacts some additions in terms of our 14-day quarantine for students, because we know we have some students closer together, and that's only in some classes, but that may have an effect. So as a reminder, we can always exercise adaptive pauses. We haven't needed to, but we can look at groups if we have multiple close contacts, and with our local health department determine if we have any increasing numbers that we need to be aware of, that we need to be closely monitoring, and decide if we have individual quarantines, group quarantines, class quarantines if needed. So again, our numbers have been fairly low, but we are monitoring that very closely as we have been.
Thank you, Katie. So as you know, we are, in terms of our 6-step process, we're in step 5. So we have our middle school students who are back full day, full time. And then we also have then those kids who are in remote, that's via live stream. And then for our elementary, we have full day with the exception of Wednesday where we have all students asynchronous. So we'll talk a little bit about that and those priorities in a couple of slides from now. But again, that's our current status. Some just quick in-person return planning updates. beginning with operations.
Yes, for the first one in operations, I'm happy to report that our staffing accommodations are back to our typical capacity. Our staff have done a tremendous job working with us to get back to school safely, and we are now back to our typical numbers.
For the second piece, the district continues implementing cleaning and disinfecting across all buildings. We've continued using electrostatic sprayers. Our MERV 13 filters make facility air just short of hospital grade. And our Cameo group has been integral in making sure that things have been accommodating.
In terms of health and safety, we were able to participate in 3 different local vaccine clinics in the month of March at Schaumburg High School, Palatine High School, and Maine East. So many of our staff were able to take that opportunity. We now have 74% of our staff that have vaccines. I believe there are more that maybe haven't had the chance to fill out the survey, but our survey results are telling us 74%. And we also have a very small number of staff who are still interested in getting the vaccine, but for their own medical needs, they need to wait until a certain time or take their doctor's recommendation. So we'll continue providing opportunities for that small number of staff who still need their vaccine and are interested. Also, since our last board meeting, the Illinois Department of Public Health and ISB updated their definition of social distance to match the CDC definition of 3 to 6 feet. That does not change our definition of close contact, which is still 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. So those are the health and safety updates.
Katie, how is that different for lunch?
Lunches, ISB and IDPH does require for lunch that students are 6 feet apart. So we are using every space we possibly can in our buildings. We've gotten very creative with our lunch schedules to make sure that students are a full 6 feet apart during lunch, and then 3 to 6 feet apart and as much as possible in their classes.
Yeah, so for some of our schools that have a higher enrollment, this is causing some problems because we only have so much time in the day and so much space in our building. So I've gotten a couple of parent phone calls just worried about some of the setups, but we are doing our best with this, but just wanted you to be aware. It's largely because there's a different definition for when masks are off during lunchtime. It limits our space. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
Maureen?
Okay, next we're going to go into that full day planning for elementary and a little bit more on the Wednesday remote. So if you could go to the next slide. This is a hot topic. I know you get emails and communications from parents. I get lots of emails from teachers stressing how important it is to them. So it's kind of one of those challenging situations. We know that this is a challenging year for teachers, and especially elementary. We've had different schedules. We've shortened their lunch to 30 minutes, have them teach remote and in person. So that is a challenging. I know they really they have appreciated having that, and I'm sure used it well. I want to just make sure first, before we talk about next steps, why we have the Wednesdays remote currently. Why didn't we just go back to 5 days so far? So one of the reasons really is an opportunity for small group instruction. That is challenging in classrooms. You saw the numbers in classrooms that have a lot of students. Not every classroom space is conducive to a teacher working with a small group when they're trying to still keep the distance. Teachers also have those at home, those in the class. When they have a small group, it would be potentially some from home, some from in class. Then you've got the others that are home doing something or in the class. You've got just, everywhere. So we've encouraged, when we change to this full day schedule, teachers to use some of that Wednesday time when kids are all remote to be more efficient with the small groups. So that is one piece. Next is the MTSS process, which is something that typically has always occurred on Wednesdays. That's just tradition, but not that there's anything magical about Wednesday. But the reason is the junior high level, our teachers have 2 plan periods per day. So feasibly, teachers could have their planning period and the other time have a meeting for MTSS. We don't have that in elementary. Our teachers have 1 planning period per day. So if we were to have MTSS meetings, we would be taking away their plan time, something that is part of the contract. So that is kind of that MTSS. We need somehow, we can do it differently, we can approach it different ways, but we want to make sure that we have the opportunity for that MTSS process especially now with potentially looking so much more closely at student needs. I mentioned contract, that's because we have a contractual amount of plan time that teachers get. And even if we went back on Wednesday, we would make sure we maintained that. So what would be impacted would be the MTSS time. It would be challenging to do both. So that is part of the rationale why the Wednesday remote has been optimal so far. And then the classroom community is a piece that I know you've probably heard from, I think, a few teachers about that as well, that doing that simultaneous instruction is challenging not just for the teacher, but for the students, to get equal amounts of attention and get the teacher attention and talk to their classmates. So Wednesday has been one time when we're all together, we can really, keep those bonds and culture going. So that said, that's the rationale, just so that everyone is aware of, why have we had Wednesdays remote. Now to look at next steps going forward, I wanted to share here, we've narrowed it down to 2 options here. Earlier in our planning, we thought, well, we could have option A, B, we had a few others, option C, option D. But some of those other options we really felt would too negatively impact the MTSS process to consider. So we really narrowed it to these 2. So especially as we approach spring, when we're heavy in the MTSS process on planning rapid interventions, wrapping up some interventions for this school year. So option A would be our current model, and the one that we would continue to recommend for the next, I think we have 6 more Wednesdays after this week. So for the final 6 Wednesdays of the school year, we would recommend that our students continue that remote and our same schedule. However, knowing that you're also getting input and feedback from parents, we wanted to provide another option, and that would be to go to 5 days per week in person, but identify 2 dates. Probably those would be Wednesdays, just for ease for parents, where it would be a remote learning day. So students would learn at home those 2 days that we choose. They might have a live session with their teacher at the start of the day, and then maybe some small groups, and then the rest of the day would be asynchronous. And that would allow teams to meet for MTSS. It would be a little challenging because the reading interventionist can't be at every meeting at the same time, but we think we could still do that if the recommendation is something that the board does not want to consider. So that would reduce the amount of time, but we would still, it doesn't eliminate that time entirely. And we feel like that is something we could really make work and plan those interventions for students.
So again, as we worked through the options, one of the options was to go, full days on Wednesdays. And again, it just didn't allow us to capture some of those important elements that Maureen shared on the previous slide. So again, we narrowed it to 2. Our option really, again, for the remaining 6 weeks is to try to keep that Wednesday free because a lot of really important things happen on that day. On the other hand, we also, as Maureen said, recognize that it is challenging for parents. The board members are probably getting some level of feedback. I've had a couple of questions from board members about it as well. So we wanted to come up with something that showed some level of flexibility. So on this particular piece, we'd like to have a short discussion and then get direction from the board.
Question. So yeah, because I know a lot of the comments that I've received from parents are, I think it's the misconception of, are the students not going to get COVID on Wednesday? Is kind of the thought. So it's important that they understand why the Wednesdays are there. But just so I understand it then, the proposed option would be there's 6 weeks left. 2 of those weeks would be a Wednesday where they would be home. Everything else, they'd go 5 days a week, but just two of the next 6 weeks, they would just be home.
Right, that's option B, correct.
Okay.
And if we thought Friday was a better day or Monday was a better day, that's something to consider. Typically not a Monday because we have so many holidays on Mondays that we generally miss a lot of Mondays. But if Friday might be more convenient for parents for the sake of childcare, that's something that I don't think is off the table. Is it, Maureen, or is there a preference for?
No, we were just thinking that parents might be more accustomed to Wednesdays, but there is no, doesn't have to be that at all. And we would take a look at the MTSS calendar and say, okay, what are the 2 best dates to accomplish the tasks that we need to accomplish? And then we would also build in, because we would still be short on teacher plan time, so we would still build in, we would make sure that we adhere to the contractual plan time and then have the time for MTSS.
My question is more related to the students with IEPs and stuff. If we go to a 5-day, would that be easier to make sure these students are getting supports for their IEPs and stuff like that? I know we've been struggling trying to get those in as well, too. Would that help with that, going to the 5 days?
Services can be provided virtually or in person, so there's not, we are providing all of our student services with IEPs. It may provide more flexibility in scheduling, but not necessarily. It would truly be individual, dependent on the student.
And what about the stress and workload on the staff here? Because, you know, the reason we have the Wednesday open now is so the staff has the availability to have everyone all in one spot, you know, and they don't have to balance it too, because we saw the numbers that Tom presented, there's still a third of the students that are at home. So if we were to go to 5 days, is this going to make it harder for the teachers that are already having a hard time finishing out this year doing the simultaneous teaching?
I would say yes, from what I've heard from teachers. I mean, they look at Wednesday as kind of the, like, pull things back together with the students, kind of solidify things for the rest of the week. Because it is hard to keep track of everything when you have students in both environments. And now even more so, that more are in person and fewer are remote, it's harder for the teachers to balance, because the ones that are in front of you are, you know, are calling your attention, and the ones that are remote are fewer. So I know the teachers struggle with that. They feel like they're dividing their attention and time, and
They do.
on Wednesdays, they feel like they can be more solid in their instruction, albeit it's in the morning, but.
Yeah, because I think that's key, is that, you know, it's not that all the students are in the buildings 4 days a week. There's still a large percentage of students that are at home, and you know, making sure that they're getting that equal attention and equal, you know, support they need from their teachers. Yeah.
I would also add that the purpose of our time with MTSS for our staff is to use data to make instructional decisions, to determine groupings, best practices for interventions, what individual students need, what groups of students need, what their whole classes need. So that time has been, I would say, even more crucial this year, with disparities and differences in classroom makeup, in model, and in student needs. Towards the end of the year in the MTSS process, we each year use the last 6 weeks to look at where students are and how they're progressing, particularly within interventions, to determine how we start the next school year. To determine what interventions need to start immediately, what students may get the feel for the culture and climate of their classroom prior to starting interventions, which students we want to gather more data on or perform different assessments with. So that's typically the work done at the end of the year, in addition to transition work and moving on to the next grade level. So that just gives an idea of what the major focus areas of the MTSS meetings are at the end of the year for our staff, in addition to the planning that they're doing for their day-to-day instruction and intervention of students.
Do we happen to know offhand what our neighboring, I think Arlington 25 still keeps Mondays, and the other, I mean, the other districts around us, are they all have one remote day? Do they have one remote day?
I know that, I believe 23 still does, and 25. There are two, I think that there, with, including us, there are 3 districts in our districts that feed into 214 that have 1 day remote still.
So I have a question. I don't know, this is probably a logistics nightmare, but what about going to 5 days for the classes that have all their students already? I realize the busing would be strange and stuff like that, but, you know, like Claremont, if most of the classes already have all their students in and nobody remotely, then why not let those kids go 5 days?
There's still the MTSS process and a few other things that happen, you know, in addition to that, that teachers utilize that time for on those days.
But how is that different than the rest of the school year?
Well,
I mean,
the other thing too
They
is.
had to fit it in before this.
Right, it's all on Wednesday right now. I mean, this still is an atypical school year, so we're not quite back to where we're at. I think some of the scheduling needs are what initially produced some of these solutions. You know, in particular, the plan time became an issue. Having full-time having access to full-time staff all the time in building was part of a staffing issue.
Right, but, I mean, you'd still have Wednesday be early release then, I would think. I don't know, I'm just asking, I mean, it doesn't sound like logistically it might be possible, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
And this is a challenge on any day, too, so I don't want to say it's just on Wednesdays, is that the time needed for entry, dismissal, hand washing, breaks, lunch, a lot of interruptions, that it's hard for a school to schedule, like, teachers get their plan time from specials, that PE,
Right.
music, fine arts.
Right.
So, to be able to fit enough blocks in a day for every grade level to have their specials is a challenge. So,
Okay.
but that's a challenge on any given day too. So, we haven't looked into that, what you're mentioning so much, but that would address, I think, a few of the, rationale, not all, but.
But we only have a handful of those classes to begin with, right, Tom? Did I hear you say 20?
At the different levels, there are most are special ed, are over half, so 20 at the elementary and 19 at the junior high.
Okay, all right.
So I guess.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Thanks.
I-
Let's let Patty go.
It's 6 Wednesdays left
Right.
for them to be able to have some peace of mind with their students and with their planning and after this chaotic year. Is that really so much for them to ask, six Wednesdays?
I guess tagging off of Patty's, because Patty, are you finished?
Yes, I am. honey.
Okay, thanks. So my question, I guess, is similar because it seems to me that given all of the juggling and balancing the teachers have been asked to do in this year, in particular with the remote and the in-person, that it would make sense to have these 6 Wednesdays for them available. But I am, on the flip side, concerned about those parents who, for work reasons or financial reasons, have been unable to send their kids back in person because it's not 5 days a week. I have not personally recently received an email from a parent who puts themselves in that category, but I'm wondering among the administration if you've received any messages from parents saying, I want my child to be in person, but I can't because we're 4 days as opposed to 5 days.
I've personally only received one, and I don't know. So each member of the SLT, with a couple of exceptions, supervised principals. Have you guys heard any comments from your principals at buildings?
I have not.
I have not.
Chris?
So I'll take this in a slightly different direction. I am, thank you for the time and the suggestion of option B. Dr. Russell, you mentioned how we finish the year is how we set up the next year. You know, in a marathon or any race or anything challenging, you don't tend to slow down towards the finish line. You keep going. So I'm of the opinion that option B, whether we do it a Wednesday or a flex Friday, or if it's possible to extend the calendar because we haven't had any snow emergency days, but to, you know, necessity is the mother of invention here. I'm a big supporter of moving to a 5-day and sending a strong message to our students and our staff and everyone that we made the best of, I'm missing a word for the year, but we're making the best of it, and we're setting up for a successful opening on the next school year, and we're going to charge through, and we have the staff, I understand, from comments, and we have the capabilities, so all the pieces are there. That's how I feel about this. So I'm very happy with option B, however we creatively move around it. Thank you.
Do we have other questions, or can we call it? If you can, we're not going to vote, but if you could raise your hand.
I was gonna say one thing.
You have one more? Okay,
Yeah,
go
it's-
ahead.
So I'm kind of leaning towards A, just because, you know, we've changed the schedule, you know, going back you know, being fully remote to being in person to, you know, 2 days to 4 days to, it's just been a lot of adjustments and stress on not only the teachers, but the custodial staff and everybody else, you know, the admin and everybody. And that's why I'm kind of leaning towards A, is like, hey, we only got 6 more weeks. Let's get through these 6 weeks. And then, you know, next year, I mean, we've proven that our mitigation strategies are, everything we've been done has been great. If you look, you know, as you saw earlier in this presentation, the numbers have been amazing. Everybody has been doing an awesome job, and I want to thank you guys for doing that, for the staff, the families, the students, for doing that, because without your hard work, we wouldn't be at this point. to have a discussion, say, hey, we're discussing 4 days in school to 5 days in school. We're still, almost 40% of the kids are not in schools yet around the country. So we've done a great job. But from my perspective, I'm going to lean towards A just because, let's kind of keep we got 6 more weeks. We know this is working. Let's keep it the way it is.
I agree, because I think things have been so chaotic, and it would be just nice to inject some calm into the situation and give teachers a break from the stresses and all the hectic stuff they've had to deal with and feeling badly with it. They feel they're letting students down because of this crazy situation with having to teach remotely and in person. So I'm definitely, leaning that way, although I feel badly about any parents that are, negatively impacted, but we have to make a decision. So does anybody else have any other comments, or I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to show me. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to say that just if we continue this way, as was just suggested, I want to be sure that the parents who have kept their children home still have the opportunity to send them during the next 6 weeks if they change their mind.
So that has been an ongoing process, as I mentioned
So they
earlier.
can
Schools have
still do
been
that.
getting contact, and I think they just work with the parent and schedule that time for the return
And
to
what's the
begin.
percentage now of those who are keeping them at home?
We're at, was that 32%
So it's
right
staying
now?
pretty steady, isn't it?
It's been dropping
Yes,
over
but it
over the
will-
last month
Yeah.
on a pretty steady basis.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to call it then. So if you could please raise your hand if you are in favor of A.
Eddie's
Yeah. Okay, so
I don't know
it
what
looks
A is,
like
but I guess that's fine.
that's a majority. So
Okay.
A is the way we're going to move forward then. Thank you for the presentation. These decisions are always hard. There's none that are going to be perfect. And let's just move forward.
Thank you. So next steps, so we'll finalize the schedules, which will remain the same. The other piece that we'll begin talking about, and Dr. Bresnahan will be involved in those conversations, is a remote option for next year. What I'm hearing from the State Board of Education right now is, at this point in time, they're not mandating a remote option. I think, though, some of our parents might make an argument that until there are shots in their students' arms, that they may not be sending their kids to school. So most of the school districts surrounding us, as they have conversations, the goal is to have all kids in class, and then they may identify some criteria for those who may not be able to attend some type of a remote academy. And that's been more of the conversation, using the ESSER dollars, or it's now called the ARP dollars, to fund additional staffing to have some type of a remote academy for kids who may not attend. But again, the goal being all kids in school. So those are conversations that will happen in the future, but just want you to be aware of what the state is talking about in terms of a mandate for a remote option. So they're leaning against that right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, you're really going to want to make sure you've got the staffing and, organizing it and carrying it all out. I guess our teachers have been pretty well trained on remote instruction. So when would that kind of timing take place, do you think, to make sure that you're ready for the fall?
I think that's something that we'll be talking with Dr. Bresnahan right away, but we will be ready for the fall. Again, most schools, and I'm assuming that Dr. Bresnahan would go in the same direction, would do a remote academy. So it wouldn't be the live stream classroom that we have right now. We would identify staff who would just have remote students.
Yeah, I think that's much better.
Question that I thought of during Ron's presentation. The CDC recently said that the transmission rates on contact services was very low as far as all the cleaning and the resources that we're doing with that. Are there any plans for any adjustments on that end? Maybe our custodial staff doesn't have to do any of the deep cleaning as often as they're doing?
I think our cleaning routine is pretty similar, but with those electrostatic sprayers, that really allows us to pass through the classrooms really quickly versus having to, spend all that time spraying and wiping everything down. Ron, do you have any additional comments?
Well, not only that, but with the filtration systems that we've implemented since phase 1 and 2, it's not even a burden. It's been great for us.
I guess I'm a little confused as to why the number, and I don't know if you all know the answer, but we started out around 38% people keeping their children home. Now we're at 33, which is not much of a dip, actually. When most of our teachers have now been vaccinated, a lot of almost all the seniors have been vaccinated, and it's now going down to the younger children, and so many people are becoming vaccinated. I don't understand why that many people, that's almost a third, are still afraid to send their children to school.
I can't speculate, but
Because we have all these different ways to try to keep the children safe.
right, but
and-
kids don't have vaccines yet. So most of the adults are vaccinated, and not all of and we only have
But
70.
I'm talking about the young children.
Yes,
you-
yes, me too. But yes, so there's, yeah, and that vaccination may not even be available till late fall based on what we're hearing now. I know that we went to phase 2 in Illinois, so 16 and 17-year-olds could now receive one of the vaccinations, was approved for that age group. But I'm thinking it's likely because parents are still not convinced that their kids are safe at school. So that's a parental decision that they have. Again, next year, the district will talk about what criteria we'll want to have for that, because our goal really is to have our kids safely back in school in the fall.
Yeah, our January, when kids actually returned to in-person, we were at 55% of our kids were in-person. So that number has changed pretty dramatically over time, but there's been a core group of families that have chosen remote and stayed
But
throughout.
considering the great number of people who were requesting that the schools have the children back in school, that number of people who decided they'll have to keep their kids home hasn't gone down that much.
No. Okay, let's move on, because we have no say over that. They make the decision, and it's up to them.
I realize that.
So let's go to 6.02, discussion of bridge intercession fees.
Oh, thank you. So it's Ridge it's a unique school calendar. There's an intercession program that is offered as an option on a fee basis only. It covers direct operating costs, the programming. So we're looking at between September 27th, October 6th, and then March 28th, April 1st. So what we're trying to do is to authorize a continuation of the intercession. We're not changing the cost at all, but we'd like to keep that frozen. We know we can operate it at that cost and break even as it is anyways.
All right.
Question for the families listening at home, what is the intercession program?
The intercession program is I like.
So
I can explain it.
Okay,
My
okay.
kids went there.
Go
So intercession was a concept that was put into place when you have a balanced calendar and you spread out the children's attendance across the year. Then you have more extended periods in between. So some of it is vacation, but then other kids need to have something that's enriched and effective for them being in school. So they contract sometimes with Ridge teachers, sometimes with teachers from other places, and they have a theme, and then they work through that theme with groups of kids for that week. And usually it's problem-based, but they've done a whole host of things. I couldn't address what they do now, but, I've heard over the years.
And Ron, is it true that a fee waiver is available to families if they want to participate in the intercession, but the fee poses a challenge?
We haven't really looked at that just yet, but that's something I can investigate. The intercession fee is definitely something new to me that I'm trying to learn as well.
Historically, we accommodate all families, so we deal with that on an individual basis, but we will make sure that if there's a family that wants to be in intercession, they can be in intercession.
Thanks.
Ron's still new to the job, so he's learning.
Thanks, Dr. Fessler.
And we did not have any intercessions this year, as Cindy just reminded me.
Janet Russo is trying to help me out with the calculation. Thank goodness for her. But let's go into something I do know, the taxi cabs. District 59, we offered RFPs, 8 taxi cab companies. A lot of times these taxi cabs are being utilized, especially with McKinney-Vento children, so that if they are we go out everywhere as far south as Kankakee, We go into almost Indiana so that we can deliver kids to our schools to make sure they do have an education. Last year, or 2 years ago, we transported about 20 homeless students on a daily basis. So that is, I mean, it's nothing to scoff at. So all we're doing is that we do this RFP so that we can lock in prices on each of these items, or each of these companies, so that we do know what we're going to pay in advance for next year.
Ron, do we have any sense of whether that 20 number has increased this year in the pandemic? I'm sure with the in-person and remote, it can be challenging to figure that out, but.
You know, to be honest with you, it has increased a little bit, not as much as you would think, because of the virtual, almost like a virtual schooling we've been doing from in-person compared to in-person. So it hasn't been much of a dramatic change, but we are curious for next year
Yeah.
because we feel like we may be losing students in one way or another, depending on where they've moved to.
Okay.
And just to confirm, since they would be in close contact with students, we do background checks on all the providers and everything like that.
That is correct.
But I mean, if you're starting a new year, I thought that really this only kicked in when the kids were in school part of the year and then became homeless and moved someplace else. So I thought that then these services really wouldn't be provided until we found out that some kids became homeless. Because if they're homeless and they live in our district, then they become part of our district.
Correct. It's a matter of how a family can come in and say if they're homeless. And it's not, I don't think it's exactly legal for us to just ask them to prove that. So that's been kind of an issue in the years past, at least where I've been.
Okay,
So someone can walk in and if they say McKinney-Vento, then it's something we'd have to take care of.
okay. I know it's expensive, but all districts have to do it. You know, it's important that kids can still be in the schools. It's one of those areas of stability that they need to feel safe and to feel part of a district and a community. Okay. So we're looking at resource allocation.
So yes, thank you. Resource allocation, actually, this is our first kind of review presentation related to resource allocation in a few years. Our last was in 2017 where we approved a 2-year plan. And in the interim, we've really looked at shifting and haven't brought anything forward to the board over those last 2 school years. And really our goal tonight is just to share recommendations based on our review, gathering feedback of where we're at today. We know things change as we move through the year, but we've gotten a good bit of feedback from our leadership team, some staff, to really focus on this piece moving forward. So the first, the 3 main items are related to math, professional learning, and then there's things we always are considering and working through. Right now, we're not looking for any additions in those additional considerations, but wanted to point them out to the board. So when it comes to math, as the earlier discussion showed, math is a focus for the district, has been a focus for the district. And I think Mardell made a comment about our junior highs look different. There is some items we've identified and want to bring some more standardization to the 3 junior highs. So one way to do that was to increase math teachers connected especially to Holmes and Grove. So as part of our plan, we'd like to add some FTEs there. And then also to address individual student needs and some gaps in learning, to add math interventionists to all of our elementary schools. Currently, our elementaries have literacy interventionists and utilize coaches and other staff to support math, but this would create a consistency to that process across the board. Our estimate is we may need 10 FTEs to make that happen. We always start internally with a review of current FTEs, look to shift things around, look at our structures. But if we would need those, we've also working with Ron in the Business Services Department would estimate that would be about a $620,000 increase in salary and benefits. It's using the idea of like a step 1 to 3 teacher, bachelor's, master's, about $52,000, and then $10,000 in benefits. It could be less than that. We do assume some new, our current teachers would move into some of these positions, and likely those would be replacements or new teachers into different kinds of roles.
I have like 3 questions already at the top of my
Yes.
head. One is, what does it look like to increase math teachers? Because that's 10 FTEs for the math interventionists, correct?
Our estimate would be 3 to 4 math teachers, FTEs for the junior high, and 5 to 6 interventionists for the elementary schools.
Oh, so that's the total. Okay.
Total, correct.
Okay, so, with the math interventionist, then this means that you're bringing it up for all our schools to have one,
Correct. So
because we have some already.
we have some staff serving in math coach or math interventionist kind of combo roles. Our move down this path would to say every building would have someone specifically assigned
Okay.
to serve as a math interventionist.
So, and how does this work, given that our schools really vary in the number of students? And is there going to be some potential inequity being put in this way because, say, Salt Creek is so much larger than, John Jay, for example?
Yes, that's always a potential, and some of our allocations, we do look very closely at enrollment. In this case, as we look at the math intervention piece, at least moving to this next step, our initial thinking was a standard allocation, but we've talked already, actually even talked today, we'd have to look at some of our math results for schools and also consider that enrollment. So you could have a situation where a school could have a 0.5 math interventionist, and 1.5 could be assigned to another building.
Okay, because you might even have like somebody that's really good coach in both literacy and math, and then you just need a half of somebody to pick up the rest. So these are interventionist jobs, not coaching jobs.
Correct.
So they're going to be going into classrooms where they're needed to assist in small group instruction, or what does that
Potentially
look
in the
like?
classroom, many of the, at least these last few years, those have been more small group pull-out classes. So they might
Pull-out,
work with an
okay.
entire grade level, and here are the 5 kids across 3 classes that need the most
Yeah.
foundational support. And that's similar with literacy, although they do work in classes also and partner with
And
teachers.
that's a result of the MTSS process identifying these small groups of students. Yeah, I saw that at Rupley. I saw a group with an interventionist. Okay, thank you.
So I just have 2 questions. What's the qualifications for a math interventionist at the elementary level that
So,
you're looking for?
Yeah, it's not a licensed position, that you have to have a certain amount of courses or a certain degree to be able to work in that area. Our work in the reading area, and we used to have math resource teachers, usually is to find someone who has that experience and often a deeper background in math. And a lot of times, this is similar skills that a classroom teacher would have, but maybe a little more experience or expertise with small groups. So as far as I know and understand, there's no additional licensure requirement. We try to find the best teachers who can move into that role.
Okay, and then at the junior high level, could you explain just a little further the rationale for adding teachers?
Yeah, so currently, amongst our 3 school models, you may have heard Friendship has utilized this, for the most part, 1.5 periods of math, pretty standard across the board. The other junior highs have not been able to offer that. So I believe our goal is to get to that similar model. That might not happen next year, but get to a similar model of that additional math time. It might look like more smaller groups in the near future, but we're working to build on that piece. And please, SLT colleagues, I know they're, Katie and Maureen have been working with the junior highs to work on that process.
I have another question I forgot to ask at the time. All right, sorry, Patty, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, reading specialists, they can get their masters and be at the top of their field and work with special groups of students. And I know we've got some in the district. Is a math specialist wouldn't be the same?
I don't believe there's a math specialist licensure. As you stated, the reading specialist, it's additional hours. You have to do a practicum to actually go through that process. A standard piece to get a math content area license or endorsement is to have at least 18 hours in math. That's rarely the standard at elementary, that an elementary teacher would have that many math classes, but.
So although there's not a certification, there are training classes that you can take to become to help with math intervention.
Got you.
I would like to see some oversight there, because if they're pulling out groups, we don't even know what may be going on in those groups to make sure that it's really working for kids. So there's
So
going to
just
be
like
some way.
reading recovery, there's also a math recovery program and training that if we choose to go that route, we can get some real targeted type of training.
Oh, that's
for-
excellent,
For
yeah.
math interventions, or we can look for those qualifications as we're trying to hire.
Right, that
I
sounds
think that
good.
other piece, as you already mentioned, the MTSS process.
Yeah.
That says, this person would be part of that team and identify kids and their needs and work with the teachers to be very
Right.
specific in that.
Very
support.
Right,
targeted.
thank you, yeah, so there'd be oversight that way as well, to see whether there was making, progress getting made. The one thing that I would like to ask, that I forgot to ask before, is you were talking about this being roughly a $645,000,
620.
620. Is that sustainable in our budget, or are we gonna be turning around saying we've gotta cut people now because we have this?
So yeah, as part of our discussion regarding resource allocation was to assure that as we go through the budgeting process, that this would fall into the current or the next year's budget and still be able to maintain a balanced budget. We're always shifting and moving things around, but we wouldn't be cutting classrooms or increasing class size to make this happen.
But I mean, in future years, is it sustainable
Yes.
beyond?
Yes.
So we have the money to be able to continue this process. Now, what is gonna not be funded then in order to increase this? Or are you saying this is a complete increase to the budget
It
beyond
is-
what we're already spending?
Yeah, that 620,000, our assumption is that would be an increase on top of where we're currently at.
Okay.
But we are looking to move other current positions to fill some of the needs. If we technically said we had no math interventionists, we'd be asking for 11 math interventionist positions. We're thinking it's gonna be 5 or 6 as we reallocate and shift.
We also
things
have
around.
retiring
Okay.
staff that will help offset some of these costs. So Ron has looked at the budget and has assured us that
Great.
this would be sustainable.
Great. So are you looking at any specific areas to try to make sure that monies are available? Like, you're not looking right now at eliminating any more coaching roles, or?
So one part, and actually it's a great transition to this
Okay.
slide. So some questions have come up of what do our schools look like now with what I'm defining as school support or synergy teams. And one thing we have looked at is potentially some schools, very few elementary schools have 2 coaches, although in some cases they're math coaches, that we would look to standardize 1 coach per elementary as a standard piece. And currently that's what we're looking at in regards to literacy and math. But we are looking at other things. ESL resource, great example where those numbers vary across buildings, so that's something, it will fall on a later slide, but we'll be looking at. But these positions in general are often standardized as, 1 social worker per building, 1 psych per building. We know buildings have different sizes and needs that go with that, but they've been basically standardized pieces. If you look at that far right column as we go through this process and look at this group, you get an idea of what the ratio is. So that 1 to 44.7 really means, so for every staff member at the early childhood who falls in that support group, there are about 45 kids. That number, I think, as a district is incredible. These are non-classroom teachers. These are people who are in flexible roles. The range is pretty tight, from almost 50 at the junior high to 43.4 at the elementary. So we've got some consistency to that piece, and that gives you an idea of, one school isn't necessarily over benefiting because they're small, or every big school gets double and triple the allocations.
And excuse me, Tom, but keep in mind that we started this work 7 years ago. I think Ruth Glady called it right staffing for those who were on the board. So
Yeah, she
we've been
did
adding
that.
social workers, counselors, all of those outside support staff for a number of years. So we've taken some big staffing increases over the course of the years. The last 3 years, we've really tried to just reallocate So we've been saving some dollars. We've been trying to build a little bit of a surplus. So looking at some of the retirement contracts that have come up, or staff, this is now allowing us to be able to add some additional support in a particular area that the board has expressed concern, and so has many of our community members as well. So it is a sustainable piece, but it has taken quite a long time to get us to this point where we are very close to being right-staffed across the board. I know that we still have some ESL gaps, and there are some other pieces that Tom will talk about with professional development that are a little further in the presentation. But again, that's the goal, to try to address those gaps.
Tom, this is really great. I have a question. Why are there only 12.6 social workers? We have 14 buildings.
Yes, so that at the elementary, so we have 11. So that 0.6, there's a 0.6 person assigned to Ridge. They don't have a 1.0.
Oh, that's right, Rich
And
did,
the
yeah.
addition, we also assign to some of our special ed programs. Some buildings have additional psych and social worker FTE, and they're really very focused on the
Okay.
program in the building.
I just want to say for the, and then
Go
you're
ahead.
next, Mardell, for this group, having been on the NSSEO governing board for 9 years and having had to help advocate for social workers and psychologists and other support staff for our special needs population, as well as other areas in the state and other member districts. There are 8 member districts for NSSEO. We are very, very lucky to have the kind of staffing we have in these areas. It really benefits our kids to have this commitment to their mental health. And it's not common, and most of the state is crying to ISBE, saying, we need money for social workers. Our children desperately need it. So I just want to say thank you, and I feel very fortunate that this district does have these resources. Mardell?
I just wanted to remind everybody that our biggest area of expense is personnel. And we can't just say we would like to have all these things, because we have to know where the money's coming from. We've gotten ourselves into bond issues because we weren't being very careful. And right now, I agree with you that resource people are very important, and that psychologists and many of these people. I'm not so sure that the having coaches in the buildings is as important as perhaps having some of the actual people in classrooms where we need them. So I do think we should spend a lot more time considering who we truly need and who we can move out into another position perhaps, or get rid of, because we can't afford everything that we want. We just can't afford it. There isn't that much
Well,
money.
the plan that we will propose tonight is a plan that we can afford and sustain. I would like to give Randy credit, though. As he looked through the slides, he asked the question, where is the equity and where's the staffing among all groups? So Tom put this together in response to that request. So this does provide something visual. And also, the bond sales and the staffing sales, or the staffing pieces, are two very different things, Mardell. They're not related. We did not go to ask for a bond sale because of staffing needs. We did that for very different reasons. But again, what we'll present tonight is something that we can afford and is sustainable.
I guess I need more proof that we can afford it, because we have a finite amount of money, and I want to be sure that we don't use more than we have, because we've done that in the past.
Okay, that's good. And actually, we can set up a time, if it's okay with Ron, and he can just kind of walk you through the numbers so that you can visually see that, and then even the 5-year projections, so you can see the sustainability piece. And I'm sure Ron would be happy to share that with the rest of the board as well.
So I'd like to, I'd really like the addition of the math interventions. So I know we as a district, as a board, have identified that we do have a deficiency in our math, and that we need to improve our math. And by adding these, interventions will help us. Adding this new Lester's math will help. I mean, as we know, there is learning loss from this year, and so I'm completely supportive. The one question I do have, though, is at the bottom, your note equals, INT standing for intervention, but / counts include district special education program staff. Can we get that listed out separately? Because,
Sure.
Just kind of get that pulled out, just kind of get it pulled out a little bit, just so. you
Yeah,
can
I'll
realize-
just
so you
redo and
can-
add, I'll take this slide, keep this one, add another one, and I'll remove the program staff that are assigned within each of those different areas.
Yeah, 'cause I mean,
Absolutely.
I do know we want the staff for the special education, but I want to kind of make sure that we have equivalency with the gen ed classes and the dual language
Right.
classes
Absolutely.
within the schools.
Katie, do some of the staff, special ed staff at Rupley service, both special ed and non-special ed students, or are they specific to a program within a building?
For the most part, I think they're specific to the program or the building.
Okay, that makes sense.
So moving on, the other area we've talked about and identified was professional learning and really looking to return the funding level to where it was back in 2016-17 for a couple big reasons. First, as you know, we're really digging into our diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity work, and really do expect to work with outside experts, thought leaders, trainers to move that work forward. So we would expect that to be more an external type of support that, depending on how you look at it, can be quite expensive. But realistically, the level of support and expertise you get, I think it's worth the investment. So we know that's a big addition to what we have currently. We also know we're moving forward with a new math resource, and we'll expand what we want to do and need to do with staff as we move that process forward. Another big piece that would be included in an addition is currently our ESPs don't attend our professional learning time on Wednesdays. They actually end their day with the students an hour early on all Wednesdays but the first and last of the year. And we've recognized that being a gap, especially these last few years, and would look to utilize a good chunk of these funds, $30,000 plus, to have those individuals stay for a number of Wednesdays, probably associated to building professional learning time, where they're doing building work. And we're actually discussing that in negotiations. We haven't worked any of those pieces out yet, but we do expect to expand on that piece. We've done it twice this year. It's about $7,000 an hour for that whole group. So when a whole group that you normally leaves is present and stays an extra hour, it's a big investment, but it's worth it. We'd like to move that forward and then assume instead of building into negotiations, we just make it part of this process. And then we've also talked about, we've got a great mentoring program for new staff, but we also know as we turn over and bring in new staff, there are other opportunities that potentially we can use some of these dollars to send people to training. These last 3 years, we've only used grant funds to send staff to any outside conferences. So we I think, are looking to expand that and take advantage of that opportunity. So that's really kind of getting back to that level would be our recommendation right now.
I like the idea of expanding ESP professional learning opportunities because, these staff really are professionals as far as the work that they do and the critical work that they do in our classrooms. And I think making sure that they are recognized and they are given quality training, just as we do with teachers, I think it sends an important message about how we value their contributions.
I agree. I will say this increase, and looking at next year's projected education budget, ed fund budget, we'd be at 0.37% of the ed fund budget would be dedicated to district professional learning. So it's, well, that's a big number. In the big picture of things, it's still a pretty small
It's
number.
pretty small. Randy, did you want to say something?
I was gonna ask the question, one thing you mentioned was the, going out for training. I mean, with the current pandemic, everyone kind of changes Zoom. Is that gonna be really something that's gonna be feasible going forward? Is it more like, hey, will it be more online class, Zoom type?
Yeah, I think.
We could accomplish maybe more professional development by staff attending, Zoom meetings. I know the part that would I would say the word sucks is that, they wouldn't have chance to, interact with other areas and
right.
stuff like that.
I think it'll be a balanced approach. I mean, we have, just like Maureen was saying, our attendance for our PD stuff this year, our full staff meetings, is just unbelievable numbers, higher percentages than we've ever seen. So that will be an important element for all school districts, all school systems moving forward in terms of the way we provide professional training and instruction. But I do also agree with what you were alluding to, that networking, personal contact, when we have people collaborating, working together, sharing ideas, that is important as well. And although we can capture some of that through breakout rooms, we still can't capture it to the level of having that personal interaction, building trust, building relationships. So that will always be, I think, an important element of any PD plan, and I assume that would go on in District 59 as well.
Yeah, I think this year, honestly, we probably had more staff attend national conferences because the opportunity is there. So that balance between those, but I think we could offer that opportunity to more staff. And in many of those sessions this year, they're recorded and you actually can access more sessions than when you go and you can go 2 in a day. Now you could access all of them. So I think we see that as an opportunity both during the school year and in the summer to open that door to more staff who, at times ask and request to go to things. And usually if it's a conference in California, that's a difficult sell during the school year.
I do have one question about that, though. One of the reasons that we moved away from sending people to a lot of outside conferences and training sessions was not just the money, but because there wasn't the continuity of learning. So I hope that's certainly taken into consideration, or, that people are strategically trained because they're going to come back and actually use it. Because I know how many corporate conferences I've been to over the years when I was working in corporate America, and, you get excited and then, it just doesn't fit in with what you're doing in your work, and most of it just gets dropped.
Yeah, I think we obviously would hope and look for alignment and
Yeah.
then see what that content is and how it can enhance things, not
Yeah.
start something new, most definitely.
Because there are definitely good opportunities. I mean, the diversity stuff is huge, and I'm so glad to see that this is going to be expanded because, of course, anybody in this room knows that this is near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad to see that we're continuing to support that in a very significant way.
And then this last slide just goes through kind of our standard. Every year, we're evaluating school and program staffing, looking at enrollment, seeing where things are at, and supporting, classes and class size. This is where we're at actually right now, based on, I pulled a report last week to look across our elementary and junior high. Those numbers are great. We know there's a range to those numbers. Sometimes we can have a class that's very large. We can have a class that's really small across our schools. But overall, our class size is pretty solid, and we want to keep it that way. As I mentioned earlier, we want to look at that ESL resource teacher piece and how that allocation aligns with the number of kids who need support and services across schools. And then a big piece that came up in our alt discussion, I think Ross led this group, was to remember we're going through this enrollment and demographic study, and that we expect to get some recommendations and information from that might inform us down the road in future years to make some decisions regarding resource allocation. So it makes sense to hold on any big next steps until we really have that information and further opportunity to discuss.
I have a suggestion for future presentations where I think a little bit more context to these numbers. For example, you mentioned range, but it would be useful to look at maybe not even just the range, but, looking at how many fall and where they fall in that class size, and the same with junior high. So we have some real understanding of, how many classes are really more at the extreme.
Yeah, I have that data. I'll package it and put it in a Friday update.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great
Thank you.
suggestion. Thank you.
And I just want to add, I think definitely we want to wait until we get the results of the demographic study, because that's going to make a big difference in what we are able to do.
Right, and I'm especially concerned about Brentwood, but I know that's on your radar.
So finally, the summary page, what we're looking at is potentially 10 FTEs. Again, we're using a formula of about 52,000 in a base salary and 10,000 for benefits on the staffing side, and then looking at an increase of 107,000 in the professional learning piece to an estimate of $727,091. Our assumption, if the way, obviously, we're looking for some direction from the board. We don't want to move down this path without support from the board, but would assume the approvals would occur through the staffing we bring through our regular staffing updates from HR and requests that way, and then the budget process for next year for the professional learning budget item.
Yeah, the math teachers, as you know it, those are hard to fill positions, especially math interventionalists. So we would like to start moving forward with that process if we have the pleasure of the board.
Can we show a sign of hands of who's supportive of moving forward with this? Okay, looks like a majority says, go at it. Patty, too. Sorry, Patty. I used to, when I was sitting there, I could see you. Now I'm not looking directly at you. My apologies. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thank you, Tom. That was good. All right, now we're up to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move for approval of the consent agenda. 7.01, approval of minutes prior meeting. 7.02, disbursements. 7.03, acceptance of financial reports. 7.04, acceptance of recommendations, human resources report. 7.05, approval to destroy 18-month-old closed session recordings. And 7.06, approval to release library grant funds.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Could I ask a question? What is the approval to release grant fund for like $4,200? Ron? 7.06.
So there's a social library grant program that they received in the amount of $4,329. They were asking to use that for the LRCs.
So we're going to distribute amongst the spread out amongst all RCs? Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's definitely something worth approving.
Uh-huh.
Roll call, please.
Garlovich,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
and Krinsky.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Excellent. Okay, now we're up to action items. Who would like to take 8.01?
I can do it. This is Courtney. Be it resolved that on the 12th day of April, 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education adopt the following mathematics programs in grades K through 5 for the 2021-2022 school year. Phase 2 recommendation as described in the table with the total cost of $177,073.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, Patty seconds. Roll call, please.
Hang on 1 second. Courtney and me. All right. Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Garlovich.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, great, thank you. 8.02,
I can take it.
all right.
Whereas bids were open on February 16, 2021 for refuge recycling services. Whereas 4 bids received with recommendation low bid submitted by Republic Services, 2101 South Bussey Road, Mount Prospect, Illinois, 60056. Now therefore be resolved on the 12th day of April 2021, the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59 approved the award for refuge recycling services to Republic Services, the approximate monthly rate of $4,759.06.
I'll second it.
All right, Mardell seconds. Roll call, please.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Garlovich,
Aye.
and Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, we're up to 8.03, approval of PTAB authorization to intervene on assessment appeals.
I'll do this one.
Okay.
Let's see. Whereas an owner or manager of a parcel or parcels of real property located within the boundaries of the state of Illinois has the right to file an appeal challenging the assessed value of a parcel or parcels of real property with the State of Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board, PTAB. And whereas an appeal before PTAB seeks a reduction in the assessed value of the parcel or parcels, and whereas a reduction in the assessed value of a parcel or parcels granted by the PTAB on a property located within the boundaries of the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District Number 59 will lead to the issuance of a real estate tax refund from the board. And whereas the taxing district has the right to intervene in proceedings before the PTAB in order to protect the taxing district's revenue interest in the assessed value of a parcel or parcels. And whereas the time period during which a taxing district may intervene is within 60 days after the taxing district's receipt from the local board of review of notice of filing of an appeal by an owner or manager of a parcel or parcels of real property. And whereas the board has determined that it is necessary, desirable, advantageous, and in the public interest to defend the board's real property tax base by intervening in PTAB appeals filed on parcels within the boundaries of the board. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59, Cook County, Illinois, as follows. The board finds that all of the recitals contained above are true and correct, and that the same are hereby incorporated herein by reference. The board hereby authorizes Francis Radlett PC and as its legal representative to A, file a request to intervene in appeal proceedings in all 2016 to 2021 assessment year appeals filed at the PTAB, for which the board receives notice from the Cook County Board of Review, and B, represent the board's interests in these proceedings. 3, all motions and resolutions or parts thereof in conflict with the provisions of this resolution are, to the extent of such conflict, hereby repealed. 4, if any section of this paragraph, clause, or provision of this resolution shall be held invalid, the invalidity of such section, paragraph, clause, or provision shall not affect any of the other sections, paragraph, clauses, or provisions of this resolution. This resolution shall be in force and effect upon its adoption.
Thank you. You might have regretted reading that, but that was very well done. You can say at some point as presented if you don't want to read the whole thing in the future. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Not that we don't mind, we like
Courtney.
hearing from you.
Courtney?
All right, yeah, Courtney seconds, roll call, please.
Okay. Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Aye.
Krinsky?
Aye.
Karlovic?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
And Mencia.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, we're up to 8.04. Do we have a motion? Robert, I like your voice. Maybe you'll do another one?
The short one.
Yeah, I'll do 8.04, why not? Let's see here. This is the school bus fee, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, be it resolved that on the 12th day of April 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education established the 2021-2022 school year pay bus fee at $379.
All right,
I'll second that.
all right, Mardell seconds, roll call, please.
Okay. Reed?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Aye.
Krinsky?
Aye.
Karlovic?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Mencia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, and the motion passes.
All right, great. Let's move on to the 8.05.
I can take that one.
All right,
Whereas bids were open on January 11th, 2021 for the purchase of 2 replacement vehicles. Whereas 1 bid was received and the recommendation is Curry Motors, 10125 West Laraway Road, Frankfort, Illinois, 60423, in the amount of $107,406. Now therefore it be resolved, on the 12th day of April 2021, the Board of Education Community Consolidated School District 59 award the bid for 2 vehicles to Curry Motors, 10125 West Laraway Road, Frankfort, Illinois, 60423, for $107,406.
all right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Patty seconds, roll call, please.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Yurlevich,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, and Reed.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Excellent. We're really making it through this fast. Now, who's going to make a motion for 8.06? Who haven't we heard from? Chris, you want to take this one?
Whereas the last day of student and staff attendance for the 2020-21 school year will be May 27th, 2021 for the traditional calendar and balanced calendars, and whereas the official calendar for the 2020-21 school year represents the following as presented here in this 806, 178 total days toward pupil attendance. Now therefore be it resolved on the 12th day of April 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves the final school calendars for the 2020-21 school year based upon the following 178 student attendance days and 4 institute days. Be it further resolved that the last day of attendance for students and staff following the traditional and balanced calendars will be May 27th, 2021.
Excellent. You know, you could have a moonlighting job like you have time as an announcer.
Late night radio voice.
Yeah, right. Hey, I think that sounds good. Do we have a second, please?
I'll second it.
All
May I
right.
ask a question before the vote
Of
on
course.
this one? So Mr. Galevich actually raised this question for me of whether, in light of this year and the fact that we've had, no emergency days and we're ending, in my experience, I guess a week earlier than we typically end, owing to that, I'm wondering if there is any option on the table to have a...
So that would have to be negotiated. We have negotiated a set number of days with our staff and our teacher and ESP contract. So those would be 5 additional days of pay for all staff. So in order to do that, we would have to approach the DEA and ESP and Cameo groups to see if they would extend their contract. If that's something that the board wants to talk about, we can't, that is a closed session topic. We could discuss in closed session and then approach the union leadership.
So I guess my question is that negotiated amount exactly the 178 days that we've met?
We will have met our school calendar for this negotiated
Okay.
school year,
Okay.
correct?
Appreciate it.
Okay, roll call, please.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Yurlevich,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, Reed,
Aye.
and Schumacher.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Excellent. I'd like to take the next one, the approval of the equity audit. So, let's see. Whereas one proposal was received for an equity audit, whereas District Management Group LLC of 133 Federal Street in Boston, Mass. submitted a proposal meeting of the district specifications for an internal audit of equity. Now therefore be it resolved on the 12th day of April 2021, the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59 awards a contract for an equity opportunity review, planning, and professional development with a total cost of $155,000. Do we have a second?
So I have a second, but I also have some questions related to
Sure.
this.
Okay,
So I'm supportive of it in principle, and I'm happy to second, but I was just wondering, given that I know we had difficulty finding a firm originally, then we found that there was a lot of interest as we dug deeper, and then now we've ended up with one company coming for review, and I did take a look at some background on them, and they look like a very well-qualified, reputable firm that served a lot of top-notch districts. But I guess my concern, just from a contractual standpoint, is looking at the breadth of the language and the scope. And I think you were probably giving us like a high-level overview, but just for the dollars that we're paying, wanting to make sure that's tied to a very specific scope of work and that we understand exactly what we're getting for those dollars.
Yes, so I think the proposal that we received was very comprehensive. And, something particular to this proposal that I had not seen in others that I researched was the specific guidance and planning process that they use, in addition to their sustainability efforts. And so I do believe, and our team reviewed the proposal together to make sure that it met the scope of work that we outlined, which we all agreed that it did, and added that component of sustainability going forward. So with this, we will have access to a very broad library of resources, as well as a peer network of other schools and superintendents doing this type of work, and an equity coach going forward to help us with our planning. So if the question is, do I think it meets the scope of the work? Yes, I do. I know I heard from others that we had communicated with prior to and researched that said that the scope was not a good fit for what they offered. It's speculation, but my speculation is that we had a very high standard for what we were asking, which is why we received less bids than anticipated.
And I guess just as a follow-up to that, so with regards to the scope, right, you have the 3 phases. You have the
Yes.
stakeholder feedback, the presenting and planning, and then I didn't make note of the third piece, but I guess
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much you broke down what you're expecting out of those specific phases. As deliverables, or as, you know, we are looking for you to gather this amount of feedback. Like I'm wondering how much granularity there is in just the expectations of what we'll be receiving, or, you know, how many people will be participating in the process for these different components.
You know, it's difficult to answer because that's something that we designed together, which is a component of this process, and making sure that we're being responsive to our particular community. So as we engage and work with district management group, we'll be outlining what we want those specifics to be. And we'll do that with input from various stakeholders, so that we can make sure that when we do get to the specifics, to the granularity of each of those items in the scope of work, that we're doing it with responsiveness to our community and our particular needs. So this group will learn about District 59. They'll learn about our families. They'll learn about us geographically. They'll learn about our services. And then we will dive into, now we'd like you to specifically look at this set of policies. And give us feedback on these specific student achievement scores and all of the various components that we put in it. But there is a level of needing to collaborate on the front end to determine what level of specificity for each of those items we agree upon is needed in our district.
Okay, that's excellent. So it sounds like it's an iterative process, but I would just, hope that given like the fees, that we would have assurances of everything falling under that umbrella. For example, like the sustainability piece you talked about as well, and the equity coach, is that all included in the fee that's being presented at the front end, or is this like an
That
ongoing
is
type of fee?
For a period of 1 year.
Okay.
Which we can start now, or we can start in November when the final presentation takes place.
Okay.
And
talk about the funding source for this a bit?
sure.
The funding source?
Yes, so we plan to utilize our ESSER funds for this, as a large component of that funding is about meeting inequities that were presented during the pandemic. So that is something that can assist in our funding source. And we also did check references with 2 superintendents in Illinois that have used this group, and really gave me specifics on how collaborative and how much of a partnership they provide in terms of really learning about your district, your community, your needs, and then planning together what that equity opportunity to review truly looks like. So while we laid out a scope of work that we believe that they can meet, we can also make modifications and changes along the way based on what we learn and based on their expertise.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Garlovich,
I'm going to abstain from this one.
Okay.
all right. Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye,
oh, and Chris abstained. And the motion passes.
that's great. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this work. I know how good Katie is at making sure that things are well-structured and that we get out of a process what we need as a district. So I think it's going to be very exciting. Okay, who would like to take 8.08?
I can take it.
All right,
Be it resolved that on the 12th day of April 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves a FedEx donation in the amount of $10,000. Through this donation, the district will receive a service package in support of a community partnership gear of our Future Ready School framework. Be it resolved that the superintendent shall communicate to FedEx in writing, expressing appreciation of the members of the Board of Education, and that this donation shall be listed in the official meeting minutes of this meeting.
all right, do we have a second?
I'll second that. Chris?
All right, thank you.
Gotcha.
Roll call?
Lang,
Aye.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrelli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Newmacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
and Garlevich.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, thank you. Now we're up to 8.09.
I can make the motion. Therefore, be it resolved on the 12th day of April 2021 that the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education authorized a compensation pool of 1.9% for administrative and non-negotiated staff.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Who is it?
Randy seconds.
Randy? Thank you, Randy. Okay.
Roll call, please.
Mencia,
Aye.
Petrelli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Newmacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Garlevich,
Aye.
and Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, great, 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 great. 8.10, the last item under action items. Who'd like to take that one?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Whereas members of the Board of Education have completed a review of compensation to be provided for administrative and non-negotiated.
No.
We just did that one, Mardell.
Pardon me?
We just did that one.
We just did that one?
Yeah, we're at 8.1.
Somebody else take it, because I'm lost. Are we at the proclamation?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I can do that. You want the whole proclamation read? Okay. Whereas the mission of Community Consolidated School District 59 is preparing students to be successful for life, whereas the future success and well-being of our children largely depends on a quality public education, whereas volunteers give unselfishly of their time and talents throughout District 59 schools to provide assistance to students and staff, and whereas District 59 volunteers are advocates for children, partnering with schools, parents, educators, and business leaders in support of the educational process and student success. Now therefore be it resolved that April 19th through the 23rd, 2021 is hereby proclaimed Public School Volunteer Appreciation Week within Community Consolidated School District 59 in recognition of the contributions made by volunteers working throughout our school district during the 2020-2021 school year for the benefit of students, staff, and our community.
Thank you, Mardell. Who would like to second that?
I'll second.
All right. Patty seconds. Roll call, please.
Okay. Mencia,
Aye.
Petrelli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Newmacher,
Aye.
Krinsky,
Aye.
Garlevich,
Aye.
and Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, that concludes our action items. Now we're on to 9.0, special interest topics.
Matt, I would like to say back to this volunteer proclamation, it's a little different this year in terms of volunteers, but I would like to acknowledge that we've had so many generous people in our community volunteer in many different ways this year, whether it was to help with the food service,
Yeah.
the financial donations, Karen Osmansky and what she's done with the Ed Foundation. So we've seen the volunteerism look very, very different this year, but it's been really significantly appreciated and supported of our families, students, and staff. So again, want to thank all the volunteers for their countless hours. And let's not forget, all of you sitting up there are volunteers too. So thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Art. That was really nice to say. You're right. We really have had so many people step forward. It takes a village. Okay, so we're up to Ross's favorite item, 9.01.
Good evening. Since the last report to the Board of Education, there have been 5 FOIAs requested and responded to appropriately.
All right, thank you. Now we're up to 10.0, new and continuing business and announcements. Are there any?
Just one thing. We will be working on the calendar, so I would like you guys to think about the board calendar for next year. We'll begin with a copy carbon of what we did this year, and then perhaps at the May meeting, there can be a formal discussion about what the calendar, board calendar will look like for next year. This year, we did a combination of regular board meetings and then also committee of the whole reports, but we'd like to ask the board to reflect on that and including new board members and come up with a calendar for next year.
Yeah, I think the committee of the whole meetings weren't, because the pandemic created a lot of problems, but I think they're really a beneficial way to make connections with the community. So I think it's good to consider, you know, how many of those you might want on the calendar going forward. So that was it for that. Okay, so 11.0 reports of the Board of Education. 11.01 is committee reports, and the first one is facilities update.
No,
I'm looking at you, Randy.
I figured that. So last week Monday, when the facility committee met, most of the things you're kind of aware of already from the Friday update. One is the cameras. We're looking to improve the cameras on the outside of our buildings. Some of our cameras are outdated and we don't have complete coverage around our buildings. And as you've known, I've seen kids climbing on the roof at Bird School and other things. It's just, I think it's a good safety measure. As you know, our biggest asset in this district next to our staff is our buildings. So we want to make sure we're protecting them and stuff like that. So we've already done an upgrade at ELC. The ELC has cameras covering the outside. Homes as well has been covered with that. We want to start looking at the additional coverage on the outside of our buildings. That just more modernize the current system. You know, we got pictures, I've seen pictures of like, you know, one of the cameras and, you know, you could probably drive a bright pink truck through and you have no clue what it was. So I think that's going to be something that we're going to look to spend and improve on our safety of our buildings. One thing we did talk about that came up in the discussion is playground equipment in our park district agreements. We have 4 communities that we work with and 4 different park districts that we work with. I think we're going to go back and look at our agreements with the park district to ensure, you know, we have the same type of agreement related to our playground equipment and stuff like that. We may own the property, the park district may own the property, but in almost every case, the park district maintains the playground equipment. And that includes the, you know, security on them, the, you know, maintenance of them, stuff like that. And we just want to make sure that's, you know, taken care of. As we start talking about playground equipment, as you know, playground equipment is not cheap. I think we're spending $50,000 to update at Bird School this summer. I mean, we're paying just a small portion of that part. So that's one thing that we are going to look to add. We're adding to our 10-year facility plan.
Okay, good.
And then last, at the May meeting, we're hopefully finally going to be able to present the 10-year facility plan. It's way overdue. We had talked about getting it done last fall, but as you know, the current environment, COVID, kind of prevented stuff from being done, because as the team working on that was more concentrating on getting our kids back to school and it's safe and making sure our schools are safe. So hopefully in May, we'll have a good 10-year plan, which will include a lot of stuff that we want to get done in the district in the next 10 years.
Excellent, that sounds great.
Randy, did you want to mention the elementary camera, the potential of the elementary?
Oh, that's right, that's part of the camera, I'm sorry, yeah. So one thing that we're looking at doing, we've kind of started discussing is, we have cameras in the hallways at the junior highs. Kind of for safety, something happens, it's kind of a nice thing to have. And we're in discussions because we do not have that at elementary level. It's something that we may want to consider and talk about. I think that is something that we probably want to make it a board discussion, because it is, I think, a little bit above the facility committee to recommend a recommendation on that. That will be more cost by implementing it that way, but it will provide for security if issues come up, you know, whatever. That's one thing that, you know, we want to consider and talk about as a board.
Yeah, we wanted to introduce it tonight for food for thought, and then this Friday, Ron will develop a little bit of a narrative of the conversation, and then put some costs on it, because with 15 or 14, 11 elementary schools, that's a pretty big price tag. But we do think, just in terms of potential liability and other considerations for safety, identifying targeted areas that perhaps we could phase it in over a number of years and get high traffic areas online. But we do think it's something that the board should seriously consider for a lot of reasons. So Ron's going to pull some of the notes from the conversation, add it to the Friday update, and then put some numbers and costs associated with the potential phase-in over a number of years for the board to digest. And we'd like to bring it back and have a little longer dialogue around the possibility.
Just a quick question. So we're talking about hallways
Yes.
versus, is there anything, I understand there's like the outdoor cameras around the building, but is there anything in connection with like the secured entrances that is on camera?
Yes. All our buildings, all our entryways in our buildings have cameras for the staff inside the building to buzz people in and out.
Okay.
So that is currently in place, but this is to further enhance that coverage within the schools.
For going throughout
Yes.
hallways and other entrances? Okay.
I think that's an interesting thought. I don't think I knew that there were even cameras in the junior highs, and I guess I'd like to just take a little bit of time to consider privacy issues, because, as a society, we just keep going down this path where there's cameras everywhere, and I know there are some benefits, but I do get concerned about privacy.
Yeah.
I
mean,
realize we're talking about little kids.
Yeah, that is a legitimate concern. That's why we felt it was something the whole
Right.
board needed to discuss.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that was a good report. Do we have any other reports of the Board of Education?
Yeah, real quick, we also met with the Behavior Intervention Committee on April 1st and discussed at a very high level the Panorama Survey, which is a survey that is given to the students to kind of get their feedback on a lot of very important topics. And I don't know if it's been, Dr. Oswald, if that survey's been made available, or the results have been made available to the whole board at all?
I don't think so.
We've seen some of it.
I shared, I cannot remember if it was last week or the week before, but I did share a slide deck that
Yeah, I
has
saw.
various screenshots of all of the data. It's pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
There is more than that, which
Yeah.
I can absolutely provide, but that's to get you started on that data on culture, cultural awareness and
Yeah.
action.
And it's really fascinating because, I'm just giving examples, these aren't actual numbers, but, if they ask a number of, students, do you feel welcome in school? And a majority will say yes, but there's still, 15% of, early elementary kids that said no. You know what I mean? And kind of peeling that onion as to who these kids are and why they feel that way. I think that's the important piece, is concentrating on that small number. But it is eye-opening because it's kind of, you see how these kids are thinking. And I've always been a big proponent of hearing from these students directly on these types of issues whenever we can. But it was a good meeting.
Well, I think when I looked at the slide deck, and I really don't remember all of it because there was so much, but I thought it was also very interesting to take a look at how the teachers feel along these different continuums. And I think that Robert's point applies here as well, that, there's a certain number of teachers who don't feel welcome or don't feel comfortable. So what can we do to make our buildings more inclusive so that everybody can feel that they belong? And I guess the equity audit may get to some of that, because to me it seems to be about equity.
Yes. So the survey that we completed, I would say, is surface level. It gives us initial data from our staff and our students. Our equity opportunity review will go further to help us with focus groups, with interviews of staff, of particular staff groups, of students, of families. So we will get a more qualitative measure of the experiences of various people in our district. So my hope is that these two things will work in conjunction to help us with very long-term planning for diversity, belonging, and inclusion and equity.
Good, because I think it's a shame to get all that data and then not actually have the opportunity to make some, take some action in certain areas. There's too much to take on all at once, but, you know, peeling that onion and getting down to doing some significant outreach, I think is wonderful. So I'm glad that that's going to be taking place, at least in the diversity and equity arena. Any comments? Mardell, do you have anything?
Oh, yes. I have attended the National School Board Convention almost every year since I've been on. And this year, because it was on Zoom, I had to go onto Zoom to do it. Did you get into it, Dr.?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you can pass these out. I always write a report after I go to a convention so that I can share what I've learned with my fellow board members. And I did that. Would you take this for Nicole?
Thank you.
And is there anybody else in the audience who wants one? Because I got a couple other, Joe, did I give you one? Okay. Okay, I have a couple extras if anybody wants one. The main speaker at the third general session was Mr. Acor, and he was wonderful. And I really enjoyed it. He spoke on mindfulness, and I think this is something that we all should think about because it's very important for all of us. So this is just my notes, but you can read it. The convention next year is going to be in San Diego. I've been there a couple times for conventions. It's a wonderful convention center. So hopefully the pandemic will be over and some of us will be able to go to it because it's a great convention.
I say,
I must say that I don't think I would do it on Zoom again because every time I went to go into a conference, it said full. Well, now, they must have known how many people were paid to be at this convention, and they should have had more lines available because I couldn't get into most of the things that I wanted, which was kind of ridiculous.
yeah.
But
and
I
it-
did go to it on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, all 3 sessions on Zoom, and it was good.
Thank you, Mardell. I would concur with Mardell that I think it's really important, especially if you're a new board member and haven't been to the national convention, to really go, because there are a lot of really important ideas and speakers and information that you'll get that you're really not going to get anywhere else. I mean, I know you can read a lot, but the excitement of being in sessions and training sessions beforehand is really, really valuable. And if you go to San Diego, I stayed at the Hard Rock Cafe last time. It was really cool. And
Tom-
very close to the convention center.
Tom, can we allocate some resources to get me to San Diego next year?
I think the board has its own professional learning budget, so, but if you need some
We have
help, let me know.
bicycles.
Yes, so the budget does include going to one national conference. There are other national conferences you might want to consider. For example, I don't know if the Family and Community Engagement Conference is still ongoing or not, but there are other ones you might want to consider, but I would strongly recommend that you go to NSBA.
And of course, the other
yeah.
thing is, that is very similar, is the Illinois Association of School Board Convention, and that's in November, and that's right downtown Chicago.
Right, and we pay
So
for
all of
that.
us can go to that.
Anything in-state you can go to. You just have to, ask. Cindy will sign us up or have Denise sign us up for those things. So I think they're very valuable.
We got a 2-for-1, Art and I, both of us going, we got it for half price, so that was buy one,
Great
get
deal.
one free.
Wow, that's awesome. The other thing is, I used to go, I used to take my family to some of these and extend the convention, so we sometimes get 2 rooms. So anyway, I highly recommend it. Any other reports of the Board of Education? Okay, reports of the superintendent's team, 12.01 graduation planning.
Okay, so as you're aware from the Friday update, we are planning on a graduation ceremony at all 3 junior high schools. We're working with District 214, and we'll follow their protocols for graduation. I did share dates with you, and I believe that they are all posted on district calendars as well. We'd also like to, any questions on the graduation piece?
Has that been, do the parents know about this already? Has that been already communicated?
Yeah, that's on the calendars. and I believe I'll double check, I believe it's already been conveyed to families, but I've not read it, but I believe that we've sent out that information, because I know that we've already discussed tickets. We will follow protocols for social distancing. The graduations will be outdoor. We're attempting to use the football fields, the football stadiums, with rain dates in mind. There will be a limit of tickets, though, and that, I don't think we have any way around that. So I believe those communications have been sent to parents already with the limited ticket communication as well. Any other questions?
When are you going to be asking for people who will sign up to speak?
I am not sure. I'm not sure how that piece will go this year, but
Okay.
I'll let you know by Friday. Because I'm
Okay.
assuming they'll still want board members to speak. I'm not sure what the full program will look like. We're also
Okay.
planning some additional things, yard signs and things of that nature, for
Oh, that's
students
cool.
and other celebrations
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Next, earlier we had our April Remote Learning and Institute Day. I've asked Tom to share, and Tom, thank you for your efforts in coordinating that. Obviously, a lot of people, a lot of staff, a lot of leaders are involved with putting together and delivering the professional development that went on during those 2 days. But Tom is responsible for coordinating. One of the days was highlighted by a district Zoom with introduction to the incoming superintendent, Dr. Bresnahan. But Tom, can you share a few highlights and summary of the overall 2 days?
Yeah, so last Monday and Tuesday, we had a great opportunity, and I will say the reality of Zoom for us this year has allowed us to really reach staff in a different kind of way and really engage more staff than when even we max out this building. It's a few hundred, but we really coordinated some efforts to have some staff planning articulation time for themselves. On Monday, as Maureen already mentioned, the math group for elementary, that group got together. We had 17 other sessions. Again, this is another great chance where TDP, PE, LRC, junior high, different groups get together. Our student services teams got together across clusters, so elementary schools like here in this cluster, Claremont, Rupley, Bird, and Salt Creek had come together as a team, and they worked on IEP pieces. So again, a great chance to coordinate. As Dr. Fessler mentioned, Dr. Bresnahan had about 15 minutes to introduce herself to the staff. I think we hit over 800 on that Zoom. And then every building had a nice opportunity Monday afternoon to work and coordinate and connect with their staff. Tuesday, we had, as Dr. Fessler mentioned, our equity session. Culture Light focus on Culture Light with Dr. Holly. I will say it was his session, and he ran it on YouTube, and it was the chat was open, and our staff was very engaged in the chat on a very consistent basis, and I think we had about 650 people on that at one time, and actually buildings tried to do a coordinated view because not every staff member has their own computer to do things. And then we offered some choice sessions and more planning in the afternoon.
Was Dr. Holly's session recorded?
It was recorded. He, I think in his email earlier this week or late last week, we hope to get it tomorrow or the next day, and want to share it back out to staff and obviously with the board if you were unable to attend. So
I was busy that day,
Tuesday
but
was a busy day for some people.
But I was getting quite a number of texts and emails from staff that were so excited about that session. So I'm dying to watch it.
Yeah,
So
I will say
thank
he
you.
has a great, in my view, teaching and facilitation style. And I will say that is probably the most independent email I've received from staff thanking us, and I'm sure Katie received a lot more because she really worked directly with Dr. Holly. And
That's
then the
great.
final piece, just to provide a little feedback, we don't force staff to give us feedback after every session, but we make it available. About 300 people responded, and I just broke it out by Dr. Holly's session and then the overall. So it's a 4-point scale, and we got some really nice overall feedback. Obviously, there are a few people that sometimes aren't as happy, and that's good to know. We appreciate that balance, and it helps us plan and coordinate things.
Sure.
But as Dr. Fessler mentioned, You know, we've got lots of staff, both at the building level and district level, making these sessions happen on a regular basis.
That's great. Mardell, you
I
want to
just,
say something?
how can we get it available to the board? Because I
Yeah,
think.
once we have it, so again, it was on YouTube, so they clean it up, and he's going to provide it to us. Once we have it, we hope to include it in the Friday update to both staff and to the board.
Good.
So I'm just curious, because when you said that they were very chatty, was the presenter like asking for engagement, or what was
He
the?
was,
Yeah.
and staff engaged, and he gave little questions and homework, and then he kind of paused and went to the chat, but throughout, when he wasn't asking for things, staff were providing a lot of chats and comments and questions and feedback to each other. Very engaged.
But it was funny. I mean, it was just, I mean, with 600 or 700 people on there, a lot of people were chatting, so the chats were just flying by. But very profound comments by staff, great connections. I thought it was really positive.
Well, when you're on those sessions, when people are chatting, they're making all these comments, you know how enthusiastic and engaged they are. I mean, if you don't get any, then I'd be worried. So that's a really good sign. Okay. April Remote Learning and Institute Day. Oh, that was just what we did.
Tom,
Never mind. I'm
Anything
losing-
else on that?
No other feedback.
All right, that concludes our reports.
All right, thank you very much. Now we need to go into closed session. Would somebody please make a motion to go into closed session?
I can make the motion. It be it resolved on the 12th day of April 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education recess in a closed meeting for discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. And collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, and discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed, whether for purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06, 5 ILSC 120/2C1-21.
Very good, Randy. That was a long one. Do we have a second, please?
Courtney, I'll second.
All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Okay. Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Aye.
Krinsky?
Aye.
Darlevich?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Mencia?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, I want to thank everybody who came to the meeting, and we're going to go into closed session. Do you need a few minutes? Yes. All right.